Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today I'm joined by Nicolò Grasso and Mr. Editor-in-Chief Jak-Luke Sharp as we review Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, the 8th film in the Mission Impossible series. It seems like this possibly is even the last film of the franchise we are getting, and we definitely have some mixed opinions about it. While we find the film to be a really entertaining blockbuster, we do have some concerns with how it's positioned as the last Mission Impossible film, and today we're going to break all of that down. This is a very fun episode. It's a little bit of a longer episode, but I think it's a really great conversation. Just know the opening of this episode is going to be spoiler free, but eventually we will move into a spoiler section, so just keep your ears open for that transition. And with all that said, without further ado, let's get to our review of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Okay, friends, welcome. I'm so excited to talk about Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning today. Of course, Nick, you are the Mission Impossible stan on the podcast. I think Jack is willing to accept that also. This is a franchise near and dear to your heart, so I'm hopeful that you like this one. Why don't you take it away with your opening thoughts for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning? To be clear, let's keep it spoiler-free. Towards the end, we can get into spoilers if we want. But what were your thoughts on this?
I was very excited going into the Final Reckoning, but also cautious, very cautious, because I love Mission Impossible. It's something that's very close to me. I watched the first one when I was very young and loved it. Ever since the third one, I've seen all of them in the cinema. Every single one of them, I can remember distinctly the day that I watched them, how I was feeling going into them, just what was happening in my life. They've always managed to come out at very key moments of my life for the past 20 years or so. And the Final Reckoning is no different, but also the Final Reckoning has a lot of weight to it. There's a lot of anticipations, there's a lot of obligations, you might even say, to fans and audiences worldwide of what Tom Cruise should deliver to audiences, what Christopher McQuarrie should deliver. There's so much going on for this film that I think it's ultimately inevitable for it to feel like a disappointment in one way or another for many people. Now, a disappointment is not inherently a bad film. And I will say, I've now seen The Final Reckoning twice. The first time I saw it on IMAX, preview screening, packed to the brim with people. It was exciting, but I had a lot of problems with it. I had problems with the pacing in the first act, which we'll get to. I had problems with the final shot of the film. I was like, what the fuck are we doing here, people? Like, what is this? It was just off. Like, so many things felt off and weird. But I thought about it. I had a full week to think about everything that I experienced, talking with people who loved the film, people who hated the film. And I came out of it thinking, you know what, it's still really good. There's a lot of it that just works. And rewatching it today at a Screen X screening for the first time, I'm the only person that I know who's ever been to a Screen X screening. I don't know anyone who has. And I have to say, I almost love this film. I still have problems, but I think there's just so much that does work. And I think, just to put it simply, opening thoughts, I think this is a movie that we need right now as society in a way. We're living in a very dangerous, dark era where there's constant misinformation, where there's so much hate and distrust in fellow people, in those that surround us, on a personal level, on a political level. And I think that we need something that is as hopeful as this film, as life affirming as this film, reminding us of the importance of trust, of the importance of hope in the darkest of places. I find it exciting, I find it thrilling, and knowing where it was going, I was still on the edge of my seat multiple times. I like how they scaled back the action set pieces. I really like the cast, even though undeniably some characters are a bit underwritten, underdeveloped. They don't get enough screen time, but also enough screen time for what? Just for the fans. I think there is not a single version of this movie that would make every fan happy. There's no version where, like, you either don't get characters coming back or you do get them coming back. Some of them die, some of them don't. Like, it doesn't really matter. Rewatching it helps solidify that this is the film that we have. You should accept it for what it is. And I think it's a pretty great film. That being said, probably my second to last in my ranking of the series, because I just love the others so much more. I think they're just more consistent. I really like this one, but it's not consistent. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, Carson.
Yeah, I'll take it away. I like this series a lot. I like the first film quite a bit. I really like Mission Impossible 3. The newer ones are fun. I think the biggest issue with the last few is I think especially with this director, this series does not always have the best writing. It's really something that I think the action has taken over as being the biggest selling point, the biggest draw, the biggest, wow, I love these movies in the cinema because the action is so fun. I was a little nervous going into this film, similar to you, Nick. I mean, a lot of expectations, really felt like they were building this up to be a definitive film within the franchise, going back with different drawing pieces from other plots, from other films within the series. You have the whole bit of finality here that everyone but Tom Cruise is trying to push, that this might be the last one. Almost 3 hours long. So a lot here to consider, think about, not necessarily knowing if it'll be great, but okay, it seems like they're really making an effort here for something. And I must say, I fucking loved this movie, to the point where I would say this is my favorite Mission Impossible film. I granted sat perfect seat and like a barely empty press screening for this in IMAX. Just had like one of the best, maybe theatrical times of my life watching this. And I think the key here is I'm so happy. And I actually feel quite strongly that this film is like a blockbuster, a lost age. And I hope we get more blockbusters like this. To where is it well written? Not necessarily. Is it this deep, I found really complex, emotionally, resonant plot, to where I thought, wow, they elevated the script here. They elevated what a Mission Impossible film is. No, not at all. But it is just almost to a comedic point, as large, as big as a blockbuster as you can get. It feels like every single scene, the film asks itself, what can we do to make this scene bigger? What can we do to make the stakes here bigger? I mean, you cannot get, I think, bigger stakes wise. It almost feels like some of the later Fast and Furious movies, where it's just almost getting to the point of absurdity. But the thing that makes this work is the filmmaking is so fucking good in this movie. The action set pieces, the submarine set piece, might be one of my favorite action set pieces of all time. You go into this and it's like, it was interesting to me because I'm like, there's a lot of blockbusters that are long, that are dumb. And why am I really appreciating this film and not like an Indiana Jones, for example, the newest Indiana Jones? And I think what it comes back to is just the craft here is like spectacular. I love that this film is big and dumb and it doesn't try to hide that. It doesn't try to hold itself back. It goes for the full orgasm, if you want to say. And I think it hits. I think it really does deliver a blockbuster in a way to where I just sat there like laughing at the end of it, not even because it was funny, but just like, this was such a fun roller coaster. I'm exhausted. I was on the edge of my seat. I was nervous. It also is like, I think, so strong with payoffs. I think every single thing they set up, they pay off well. I agree with you, Nick. The one reason I couldn't go 5 stars on this is the first like 30 minutes is jarring. It is a very, very rough setup as they try to transfer from Dead Reckoning Part 1. To be clear, the name is still Dead Reckoning Part 1. I don't want to hear anyone mislabel this as just being Dead Reckoning. As they try to transfer a plot like that into a plot that is this big and there's a time jump, I do think it gets a little bit messy here and there, but ultimately this is, again, once you get those expectations of this is not trying to be a Fallout, this is not trying to be a Rogue Nation, this is not trying to be a Dead Reckoning Part 1, it's trying to just go for the spectacle. That didn't bother me really at all. Like, I think the performances here are great. We'll get to that. Tom Cruise is excellent. But just overall, like, I went to this movie, I had a complete and utter blast, love cinema. And how could I not celebrate that and feel like this is giving me everything I wanted? Again, I think if you are a huge Mission Impossible stan and you are someone who really likes what some of these previous films were with their control or with their depth, or with their more scaled backness in some ways, I guess you could say, because this is a series that, while over the top, is not necessarily overly comedic in some ways like Bond has been. I could see you being really disappointed by that, but considering I don't have that emotional attachment to like a vision of what Mission Impossible has to be, I felt like I just love this. I mean, I truly, like, this is one of my favorite blockbusters in like decades. I think this is like a really wonderful film, so I appreciated it. I have no idea what Jack thinks, so this is why I left you for last, Jack. Which way, which way of the spectrum are you going to be on?
Well, just for the starters, I really like this franchise. I think it's probably the best modern day example of like the action genre going, bar John Wick, and even then John Wick's at 4, maybe 5 with Ballerina. We'll get there, but this one for 8 series, I don't think's had a bit of a dip. My favorite's the first one. I love the Brian De Palma thing. I don't mind the John Woo one. I know we've done that on Gems. The third one I've got a really big affection for, because I remember being quite conscious at the time of him needing that. I mean, that's his partnership as well. I can never remember the person's name. They went with Paramount there. He needed that to be a big hit after War of the Worlds as well, with his stunts in the media. And I remember Ghost Protocol being massive on and then obviously Rogue Nation, so on and so forth. I'm in the middle of you two. I'm also on Nick's side, really. I don't love this, but I really, really like it. Every time these have come out, I've taken my mum and dad to go watch them. My mum and dad are very much like, they'll watch stuff on Amazon for like 15 minutes and they're not bothered, they'll just turn it off. But my dad is quite like centric of like, what should we watch? What should we watch? And every time I take him to watch this, they both really like it. But for me, since Fallout, and I remember having this chat with Nick years ago now, where everyone loved Fallout, and I was like, yeah, it's fine. And then Dead Reckoning Part 1 came out, and I was like, oh my god, like it doesn't feel like it's one, pardon the pun, one entity. It feels like it's part of another side of a coin. And I always find that difficult to struggle with, because ultimately you need two sides of the coin to really see the piece. It's really difficult as a critic to look at part one of anything if it's a conclusion or to be continued. It's really difficult because ultimately you have to assess it as one project, and narrative is going to be half baked. Twists and turns are not quite yet there. The whole form of it, the structure is going to be off. And I've watched Dead Reckoning since then. I still have the same issue with it. I like this. However, there's a significant here where you can get into and you can start to strip this away. First and foremost, this is so shockingly for a Tom Cruise and a McHugh production. This has seemingly no confidence in itself in order to stand on its own feet. There's been a lot of conversations about flashbacks. It's the first film to use flashbacks. This is not a spoiler. It's quite well documented. I didn't know how substantive that was going to be, and it is. The first 45 minutes of this is very, very strange, like you said, Carson. However, because it is 8 films deep, there is like this affection where you sort of give and take slightly. And once this starts to ramp up, and it has 3 big action set pieces, the one in the middle, truly sensational. From the moment he's on a helicopter to the moment he's somewhere else, the whole 35-minute is genuinely nail biting. You can hear a pin drop in the cinema. It is excruciating to watch. It's fabulous. Then there's another set piece at the end, and I must admit, I found it really quite underwhelming. This is a very strange type of production here, because part 1 and part 2, the whole essence of it is consistently homaging the whole centerpiece of the all 8 films. You have the train, which is a homage to the first film. You know, in part 1. Then you've got the underwater thing, obviously in Rogue Nation, and so on and so forth. And there's other things as well with planes, but it felt like there's a lot here which has been done better in more smaller circumstances, especially Rogue Nation, with the drowning sequence in that. And I don't know if you two notice this, but I swear to God, the sheer amount of ADR work in this that has been dubbed over is genuinely frightening. There's the amount that Gabriel is in the shadows and is talking, and you can see that the lips are moving and he's not saying those words. It is so consistent throughout the first 45 minutes, even the hour. And I think this has gone through multiple reshoots. I think everybody knows that it was meant to shoot back to back. It wasn't. It was postponed. Then it would hit with the strikes after COVID. It hasn't had a really good flow, and I think you can tell that. And I think there's an issue with narrative. But ultimately, I don't think you come here really for looking at the plot and the narrative and looking knee deep into it and pointing stuff out. I wouldn't even categorize this as young, dumb fun. I think this is just really a well-crafted set piece. And as in a cinematic standard, I think this is exhilarating to watch. It is just surprising that the weakness of this is that it seems to lack confidence. It seems to lack conviction. It seems to lack an understanding of presenting certain things and needing the audience to constantly reiterate to something else, which is surprising because there's flashbacks, don't get me wrong, but then there's flashbacks to flashbacks in this film. And I was watching, I was like, these are the same people who put Fallout, put Dead Reckoning out, and put Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, in number 3 and then number 2 of John Woo, they defied expectation throughout, and they never seemed to be bothered about ultimately what they were going to craft, aside it from being a set piece for being, you know, they set the standard, they set the trail, they set the standard of action set piece. Burj Khalifa, the skyscraper in Dubai. To get the insurance for that and listen to that story, they set the standard, they set the precedent. This one felt like they were more sort of concerned of, right, we need to up the ante. And once you get that, and once you start doubting oneself, I think that's where it comes to, you've got, like what Carson said, you've got to then evolve and make it bigger and bigger. And just because you make something bigger, I don't think you sort of still can contain that excitement of the immersion and the tension of it. But overall, I think that's a standard. I think this is really good. I can't wait and this to conclude my opening thoughts. I can't wait to get this on DVD or Blu-ray, on home video, as the kids say, and watch these back to back, like Reload and Revolutions, like any part 1 and part 2. I think it really needs to be connected. I think the experience then will be as one. I think it will work far more easier as an experience. But overall, I think going back to the cinema and finally watching something like this, I think was so fun to see. So I'll be interested to know how deep we go to this. But as an opening thought, I think it was really fun, but some very strange flaws. But I'll throw it back to the two of you.
Well, I think it might be helpful to talk about this film and its identity in both parts of being a part 2 for Dead Reckoning Part 1, but also being, again, seemingly a finale or conclusion to this series. I mean, there's a ton of references, as you mentioned, flashbacks, a little Easter eggs for the fans. The whole time I was like, oh, Nick is gonna love when he sees like, oh, the date is this date on the paper and everything. There's all these little things. And I think those are two identities that I felt were quite warring at times. You mentioned that in Dead Reckoning Part 1, there are these references, like the train specifically is like this clear homage to the first film. I feel like this film tries to take on a very different identity than was what was set up with Dead Reckoning Part 1. And I think that's to a fault of mainly Dead Reckoning Part 1. I think rewatching it back to back, like you mentioned, I think the identity of that first film is really going to kind of fall apart in a lot of ways, outside of setting up characters and setting up a conflict here. A conflict that I also will say, like, I don't think the entity, at least with what, again, was set up in Dead Reckoning Part 1, is like even really that relevant of a character. I mean, yes, it's the thing, but it's not like the entity is actually doing anything. I felt like that was kind of weird. I feel like for me, I have to view this within a vacuum of being its own film, or I can't really appreciate what it's delivering as being a part 2 because it just isn't really a part 2. Nick, how did those identities play out for you? I think especially, I mean, I'm curious about your relationship with this in Dead Reckoning, but also just as a piece, as a definitive piece in this franchise, kind of closing chapter 1 of it at least. How did that play for you?
Yeah, no, I actually really love that Reckoning. It's something that, like, when I watched it in the cinema, I was like, oh wow, this was not what I expected, but it still hit very hard for me. I found it to be one of those rare part 1s that kind of stands on its own. I think I had so many problems with the whatever Spider Verse that came out in that year. I was like, that's not a that's like a just as you didn't finish the movie. It's not a part 1. It's just an unfinished film that's going to be continued in 7 years from now. But that Reckoning works as its own movie. I've seen it like 4 or 5 times at this point. I even listened to the commentary track. I really like it a lot. I would say that it's kind of like a double-edged sword. There are some things where you do need that Reckoning to make this work. Of course, everything that's been set up about the Sevastopol and the Cruciform Key and the Entity and Gabriel, like all Grace as a character, like all of those parts are needed. But also so much of Final Reckoning, like Jack mentioned, is very reactionary to the reception of the previous film, to the fact that it's not so much a part 2 as it is its own movie, that things that were clearly set up previously have zero payoff. Where at this point I just kind of like accept it. This is the world we're living in right now. This is the movie we have. I can't do much about it. It's fine. They made their own choices and they had their own reasons for making them. They're very smart people, McHugh and Cruz and everyone else. But it kind of hurts that, for instance, you have the character of Marie, this woman from Ethan's past who was killed by Gabriel 30 years ago. She's the reason why he ended up joining IMF. Who was she? Who was Gabriel? What happened there? Spoiler alert. you never know. It doesn't really matter. Like, they shot multiple scenes with that poor actress just to be completely left on the cutting room floor. Why? I don't know. We'll probably never find out. It's fine. It's something that I find very, very fascinating. On screen, you are seeing characters who constantly say, "How are we gonna do this thing? We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out." It's like, since McHugh, like on Ghost Protocol, McQuarrie was behind the scenes, ghostwriting and rewriting the script, and that's just been what's been happening. It's like, we'll figure it out. That's the motto of the team, and that's the motto of the crew, the filmmaking itself, which I think kind of bites them a little bit with this one, because they try to make it a bit more pompous, a bit more of a proper like finale. I think if they didn't have that pressure, they would not have resorted to like some key jangling of like references to the previous films. That being said, did I get emotional during the opening montage both times? Yes. Did I get very excited when certain characters popped up again? Yes. It's very simple, it's very easy, but because again, I think that just in general, and you both mentioned it, and I completely agree, it's not so much that like you shouldn't watch these movies for the plot, but I think that it's not so much about like what's happening, what's supposed to happen nonsense. It's just about moment to moment action, moment to moment intensity. The moment when, okay, these characters need to be in this space doing this thing. Hopefully they don't die, because otherwise this other thing won't go to plan. It's like, that's what I live for in these movies. And that's why this works so well. And it's been very disappointing. I would say that this is almost one of the other reasons I would say this is a needed film, is that it's one of the very few mature blockbusters for mature audiences, in the sense that it's for people who actually want to follow a film. Because I'm becoming a Reddit rat of sorts recently, just because I found it very fascinating on a sociological level. You go on Reddit and just read what people think about certain movies, and it's shocking how many people are complaining about plot holes in Final Reckoning, that they're just a showcase of them not being able to follow the plot, follow what's happening. Not even just like the loads of exposition, which is a bit overwhelming. I won't deny that. But just like, I mean, I don't know. What was the importance of the date? I didn't get it. It's like they explicitly say why that date is important. Were you just in the bathroom when that happened? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, Jack, if you have something to say, or Carson, actually.
To be clear, Nick, you know the importance of the date, like in real life, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's the opening date
Okay.
of Mission Impossible 1, 1996, baby. I was not born yet.
I knew it was the
Shy
right
of
year.
1
The
year.
whole time I was like, I need to look up, is that actually the right date? It has to be. And yes, it was.
Which is also when the movie came out. Like, this movie came out on the 22nd of May officially. Yeah, close enough. 2025.
I mean, just on that note as well, it's interesting because I'm not as a diehard fan as you are, but I go into this with zero expectation, and I must admit I've never gone into these films with any form of conflict of like, oh my god, what are they going to do next? For some reason, I just go into this as a blank canvas, and I always get quite entertained. I'm not necessarily sure if anyone else, probably you two, would maybe different. I never went into this expecting anything either. I just wanted to see how another Mission Impossible film. I never really went into this knowing it was the end, because we're going to get onto this in a certain question later on. But with these type of franchises, it's never really the end, is it? It's very difficult to have a finality to it. And he might, Mr. Cruz might come out and say, "Well, this is it." The film is a bit more sort of less lenient towards that as well. And it's an interesting one because I think at the standard of filmmaking now, granted, you bow out when people are wanting more, but at a certain pop culture, there's nothing really like this. And I think you no one else can really do this. I'm not really a fan of, as much as I'd like to see someone else do this. I think, especially when it comes to like my favorite franchise as well, it should really stay in house. I think other people should come up with their own thing and craft that, and let the people who built the house live in it. And then if they want to destroy it and build it back up again, it should be left up to them. More so that we'll get into that when we come to Ballerina and stuff like that. That'll be an interesting one, because this franchise has gone through a lot of hands. It's gone through De Palma, it's gone through John Woo, it's gone through a lot of reactionary type of filmmakers, in a sense of, well, we want to be different aesthetically, artistically, and we want to be different in terms of um, set piece. But the craft has always been the same, and we want two or three set pieces, and we want to push it each and every time. And I think it's interesting that I don't think it's ever failed me in a sense of this one. And I'm not saying it's failed me. That sounds like I find them redundant, or I have a nasty response to it. I think that the actual finale, the climax, I found to be anticlimactic in a way, just because it seemed to be very passive to me compared to the intensity of the ending of part one. And I think nothing, and this is, as soon as I finished this, I didn't go back and watch Dead Reckoning. I go back to Fallout. The one film I go back to, if it's not the first or the third one, I go back to Fallout, and I can never realize why until I finish the film. And the last 20 minutes in the helicopters of Fallout, I think, are just absolutely scandalously good. Like, truly, I know there's more CGI there. I know there's not less of practicality compared to bits before, but you get like the opening 20 minutes, the Halo jump. Like, and I just think, like, I'm there. For a film that I came out with, I was like, it's okay. I constantly go back to that and think that is the crescendo for me. I think it's exhilarating. And this is just a very strange thing, because everything is in these part 1 and 2. There's everything you want, everything there is for a fan of this franchise: set piece, character, and I want to get into the references a little bit later. I don't want to spoil anything. We can get into that if you want to whenever we start getting on the nose. But it was just very strange to watch this and be like, oh, okay. And maybe in retrospect, when I go off another 5 or 6 months, I come back to it, I think I'll have more of a passion for it. And that's what the films do for me for some reason. I always come a little bit too late after I've seen them. I don't know why. I think it might be fatigue or watching a lot of like films or action films and stuff like that. I watch a lot of horror. Maybe I'm not into that sense of mind, but there seems to be trying to capture the next big thing. And I think for the middle part, because everything is so long, and I don't think you have that. There's a lack of intensity. And granted, the middle set piece here is profound in its way of it's meant to excruciatingly pause and stretch out the intensity and the atmosphere of the sequence in itself. It's meant to really prolong it. But the thing about the final one is the final sequence in itself is like there's a dissonance of like tone in the two of them, whereas everything else feels like when he climbs up the mountain. Sorry, when he climbs up the tower in Dubai, it is very slow, but there's a secondary shot of sequence there where they're doing the switch with the masks, and I think like it cuts back and forth. You have the intensity of what's happening, and we take the tension out. I don't know if you both noticed, but in both sequences, the one that surprisingly works in the submarine, it does not cut away. You're there and you feel it, but the climax of this, it cuts back and forth, and for some reason I find that the worst part of it. I just think it lacks an idea of like, it just plays with, I don't want to get into spoilers, but it just plays constantly with what's going to happen, and I think it's just too calm. It's a little bit too mundane in its climax compared to this being the final one. And I think that's what Carson said about it. I think it works against it, or maybe you said that, Nick, sorry, but I think it being the last one, quote unquote, works against this. I think if you don't go in with that, I think this is a lot more emotionally impacting. But because there's a context of, well, there's not really a question mark, it's a full stop, I think you sort of ordained to think, well, they're gonna go, they're gonna go. And I don't think you don't get that play very well, because Dead Reckoning does that. I don't want to spoil that. There's a character now which I think everybody was like sure as shit thought they were going to come back to this. And I genuinely, when I saw a certain hospital bed, let's say, I was like, oh my God, here we go. And then it was like, oh no. And even with that, with Haley Atwell, we'll get into, again, I'm going all over the place, but there's like niggling feelings here where like, that doesn't really make sense with the character projection, and that feels forced. That feels like it should be someone else. Maybe it was written as one, and then the pause has not really helped. I don't know. There's a lot of production here, but wherever you want to go now, Cast, and I will start getting into it, because I'm starting to get heated up now. Heating up my water.
Did you know you could be listening to this episode of ClapperCast early? Well, if you go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/ClapperCastPodcast, there are 3 different tiers that you can choose from, each with their own means of support and each with their own means of rewards. You can get access to early episodes, bonus monthly episodes, bonus reviews. You can see our schedule early. Of course, thank you everyone who's already joined us on Patreon, and we hope to see you over there soon. Well, I have two things I want to say about that final climax,
Go on.
and appreciate that we're not getting into spoilers. And I do like to be clear, I like the overall set piece. I think there's two big things that work against it. The first is just in comparison, it's one of the weaker of the film because the rest are, in my opinion, so incredible that naturally is going to feel like a downgrade. Also, though, the emotions of that, and again, not getting into spoilers, is it really relies on the character of Gabriel to provide this like emotional release for the audience, relief for this audience, that there's some weight there because it's him and Gabriel. And not spoiling where that goes, but like I just don't think the character of Gabriel between these two films is why it's one that they've tried to build up undeniably as being this big bad, this big threat.
Oh, they tried.
He has all this history with Tom Cruise with Ethan Hunt, but it's not one that I think necessarily was overly successful. The one pushback I'll say is I think that idea that this might be the finale did work in the sense of I think it did increase the stakes for me at multiple points because you just genuinely don't know. Like if there was 10 more of these we know coming, that takes a lot of stakes out of a lot of action sequences. I think that's something with a lot of this franchise action. It really does bother me at times. But I think especially coming out of John Wick, now granted, there's always a question mark, as you mentioned, walking into this, the poster that was next to the theater was the ballerina one with Keanu Reeves right on it. So it's like, you never know if it's the end. Actually, they can always bring him back. Tom Cruise is even out there being like, no, don't listen to the director, I want to make these until I'm 70. So like I think there's even conflict there of like some people really want this to be the end, some people don't want this to be the end. But I do think that overall increased the stakes, especially again, not just keep going back to the submarine sequence, but there was like multiple points there where I'm like, okay, we're doing that, like that's crazy. Again, spoiler free, so I'll keep my thoughts vague there. But I think those two reasons are why I felt the end sequence, I will agree, felt a little bit lesser than it probably should have. Nick, I believe you have a response though also.
Yeah, no, I actually, I don't know, like watching it both times, I still found the ending to be very exciting. I have another hot take actually, though, why I think you feel like that, Jack. And it's just like a very general hot take.
Go on.
I think Mission Impossible Fallout should have been the last one. And this is coming from
Ooh.
someone who did love Dead Reckoning and who loves this one. Because the ending of Fallout is almost beat for beat what they do here. Again, almost beat for beat, including the cutting away that you mentioned, Jack. It does the same exact thing. There's a ticking clock in one part, there's a running against the bad guy in the other thing, and we're just like intercutting between the two sequences. I do think this one really, really works, but I'm one of those who says that Fallout is the best one of the series. And I strongly believe that mainly because it's the most exciting, it's the most fresh. Christopher McQuarrie was just at the second film in that case, and it was just like, okay, let's try to do this and do that. And like you mentioned, it's such an escalation where you go halo jump, incredible fist fight, car chase that turns into a bike chase, that turns into a shootout, that turns into a foot chase, that turns into the helicopter, that turns into the fist fight. It's like, oh my god, like it's just building and building in 2.5 hours with a team that's already been established in the previous film. Like we don't have new characters in that one, basically outside of Henry Cavill and Angela Bassett. Those are the only two new characters in that film. It has that area of finality without all of the baggage that comes with being the final one. And I think with this one, they tried to get a little bit like, the part one bit them in the ass. They are fully aware of that. They were like, why did we call it part one? Because it's setting up something completely different from what we actually want the audiences to experience. And what you said earlier, Jack, I fully believe it. They didn't have enough trust in themselves making this film, and they resorted to doing something they would never do. I remember listening to like the 4-hour long Empire podcast for like Fallout that McQuarrie did, and he was saying like yeah, people want the references, and like, is this a thing to the previous one? It's like, no, like that's not it. Like I don't care about this fan service. And apparently there's another podcast from like the time that Reckoning came out where he mentioned those things. And then you have today to now with Final Reckoning, which is just full on like, hey, remember what happened in the third film? Remember what happened in Ghost Protocol? Remember with this? Remember that? Let's just cut back to it 50 times, which is fine. Again, I'm not saying like it bothered me, but it does have that slight feeling of like, this could have been something more. It's just overstuffed as well. Like, I like the cast, I like the new characters, but it's just like, do we need Hannah Wendingham in this? Like, her character, do we need it? We have this entire submarine crew. They're great. I love them. But do we need them? We spend so little time with the main team. On the flip side, I also say that one of the beauties of the series is that each film feels different from the previous ones. And this one feels like a almost apocalyptic film. It has that element of doom and gloom. There's like Tom Cruise running around London is straight out of 28 Days Later. There's like no one around. And it's just this, like, I don't know. It's almost also like so many references to 1980s and 1990s Cold War thrillers with sweaty men and women in these giant war rooms, just like, oh my god, they're DEFCON 1. We have 20 minutes. We need to kill 1,000. Like, oh my, like, and I personally find that very intense. All of the war room stuff, I was sweating bullets. I was like, this feels a bit way too real as well, considering what's happening in the world right now. Um, which made the entire climax and the stakes of the film work. But also, I get why they wouldn't. Again, it's a bit too big for its own good. I think if they do go back to like making another one, they genuinely have to go back to the scale of the first film. There's this list or whatever that needs to be stolen. It's gonna reveal something, and that's it. We don't need nuclear apocalypse. Like, you can't go back from that. You either scale it down or you end up actually like Fast and Furious.
I'm gonna, because you come out the hot take. I'm gonna come out the hot take. This hot take, right? I have absolutely no proof that to substantiate this claim. I think this film has severely affected Cruise's and McHugh's relationship. I think you can tell in the editing room there is a reaction for Dead Reckoning Part 1, and the two of them haven't really solidified the direction, and one has come it from one angle, and the other has come as the other. I think the flashbacks, the fan service, let's say, is Cruise. I think undoubtedly it's what can we give the audience to get them back in seats to enjoy it. I think that's where he comes into it. I think McHugh comes into it like we need to intensify it. We need to build. We need to change the set pieces. We need to do something a little bit different, but
I can
also
see
make it
that.
the same. And I think the two of them coming together, and one of them saying that this is it, which is the director, and then the other one, the star, saying no, I want to do this when I'm 70. I think this is going to be, just mark my words. And I just genuinely feel, and I said this about the Halloween kills on that podcast. There's massive issues with that when Ends came out, and I was fucking bang on with it. I think there's going to be. I would be shocked to see if these two worked again on this franchise, which I think they won't work without each other on this, and therefore, if they never will, it's in limbo until they come up with something, or they don't work it with each other again. I would be shocked to know which one it is. I think it'll probably be the former rather than the latter. I think they'll go get another project. But I think Cruise is looking for the Academy Award. Be interesting to see what happens with Inarritu, and then see what happens with Doug Liman, and see with his Top Gun sequel as well. But other than that, he needs to go back to character work. He needs to go back to the Magnolias. He needs to go back to the likes of Vanilla Sky.
Yes.
Although, yeah, I think that's where he's going to test the waters now. But the thing with this is, and I'm desperate to get into Gabriel because I'm pissed off with this. I don't want to get to spoilers, but I'll just mention this briefly and I'll go into Gabriel because it immensely pisses me off. But I think the relationship here is very strange of how this comes together because I think it is two very different type of filmmaking sensibilities. And I like the fact this honors its roots, but it double downs with it, and I'm not too sure that the confidence that these films with McHugh, who, like you said, Nick, is not interested in honoring Ghost Protocol. That's Brad Bird's film. Not interested. I'm not interested in what J.J. Abrams did. That's their film. John Woo, respect it. Brian De Palma, respect it. These are my films. I think what happens with Rogue Nation there is that it has like this freeing nature to it, and each film comes out, especially Fallout. It's like I'm not really interested. We'll have a Halo jump. We'll have two helicopters fighting each other. I'll have Henry Cavill as my villain. Like it feels like they become distinctively different and they become more comic booky in a sense. But I quite like that. I like that formula. I like that it gets a little bit crazy, a little bit silly, especially when you get to like I said, part one. It's like we've got a train sequence. Like because they want to honor Buster Keaton, but they want to honor the De Palma. I think the Cruise thing comes into it, and I've got no problem with that. He's a producer in his own right. He's a very respected producer as well. But I just think there's two mentalities coming into it, and I don't think I'm telling you this. In other productions, them two coming together would sink this fucker like the Sevastopol would sink this fucker down to the ground, and you never see it again. But I think because these two are so passionate about it and they've thrown so much money at getting this out, I think it does work. But in other productions, I just don't see how this could have found common ground. But just to move on, Gabriel, right? I find this really interesting because to have a major villain, and these films have always done really well with it. The villains, I thought John Voight was excellent. I think Douglas Scott, I think, is the weakest probably one, but he's still intense, maniacal villain. I think Philip Seymour Hoffman, God rest his soul, is the pinnacle. Just a nasty, vindictive human being who's not interested in anything else. Just wants to hurt these people who robbed him. I think the villain of Ghost Protocol is like wishy washy. I'm not like another one. God rest his soul. Like, I can remember his Nicolò. He's in obviously the villain of John Wick, and he's in the Girl Dranger too. I can never remember his name. He's like a bit wishy washy because you don't
Michael
really know.
Nyqvist.
Yeah, and I think
Mikael.
that is what is similar to this film is that there's an ideological villain, not necessarily a human being. And then when you get into Fallout, you've got the physical manifestation of it. With these two, it feels like it's trying to find the physicality of a Philip Seymour Hoffman and a Douglas Scott, a visual and physical presence, but also an ideological one, which is similar to like Ghost Protocol. And I don't think both of them work as intense together as they should do, ironically like the film itself. But I just think Gabriel is such a massive waste. You either bring back someone as a villain who we know who's been there from day one, and I hate to say it, but it should have been someone in the first film. It should have been someone who has been there all along. I'm not saying it needed to be what's his fucking face, Emilio
80-year-old
Estevez.
John Voight.
Yeah, no, 90-year-old John Voight, yeah, in the corner.
Let's not do John Boy anymore.
He's back.
We don't
He's back.
with his red hat. Anyway, but I think it didn't need to be like Emilio Estevez, but it needed to be someone who you've had texture with before, who coming back with all these homages made sense. Now, that's fair enough. That's a decision they didn't go with. But the idea that you bring someone up, it's like, well, he's been here from the beginning. He's been here. He's been tormenting Ethan. We don't know who he is. So we have to find that in real time. And this film is not there to express those because it's a feature that's in the present. It very rarely plays with the past. And it always is on the cusp of the future. What if Ethan doesn't save these people? It's all constantly with the tension of that, but it always plays in the present. What can we do now? This one is constantly in the future. What are we going to do? The end is near. What are we going to do? The end is near. And I think it's just this sensibility of this is all off. But Gabriel as a villain is dire. Oh my god, he's dire. Like we get him in the tuxedo, like we did Philip. There's so many like trying to homage or trying to invoke previous exploits. And I have to say, reading the production history, this was cast as Nicholas Hoult. Now I don't know if anyone out there knows this, but Nicholas Hoult is not a 55-year-old man. He's in his mid to probably late 30s. He's 2 decades younger than Tom Cruise. Now, if he's cast in oh my god, why can't I think of this? In pre-production, then sure as shit, this has had some radical rewrites. Because how can you write this character as a 35-year-old and now be a 55-year-old? Because surely the context of that opening prologue, or let's say the flashbacks in Dead Reckoning, don't really make any sense there. So fundamentally, by the first principal photographer, there's rewrites. I don't think this has ever recovered from that. Now, it makes you think, in what context do they present Nicholas Hoult as a 35-year-old villain? In what could work as dramatic as this? Is he someone's son? Because there's motifs of that and stuff like this. Is he got connection to IMF? We've never seen him before. It's an interesting parallel universe there, which I think is probably even worse than this, shockingly so. But as a villain, I think Gabriel is just so second standard. There's no physical presence. There's no evil, maniacal, manic sensibility of this is a human being who's on the path to destruction. He's just involved with this program who, okay, like, what are your reasoning? Why have you succumbed to this? Why do you need to kill Ethan Hunt? Why do you need to the entity to be this thing? Like, we don't need specifics, but I always think about the Emperor Palpatine, right? The original Star Wars trilogy. You have no idea who he is. You only know he's the Emperor. you have this visual presence. And granted, the writing isn't just not there, but he's the emperor. He's this evil, vindictive alien creature who's like the face of a 90-year-old woman. When you look at something like that and you look at how underwritten it is, and granted, hindsight with how that franchise has gone, you have more texture to it, so don't get me wrong, but I'm looking at the context of that third film, Return of the Jedi. When you look at this, they just do not give any arc or depth to a character who is killing people left, right, and centre, and doing it with such glee and conviction. But why? Why is he getting off on this? And if he was like an ex-IMF agent, like they tried to do in Mission Impossible 2, I would have found that a little bit more convincing, like going against not necessarily a protege, but a contemporary, that the opposing yin to Ethan Hunt's yang, and that would make so much more sense. So even fundamentally, the writing here is just like extremely obscure. But Gabriel, for me, and the two, and the actor, I really quite like the actor. I like the vocal range of him. I like how soft and vindictive he is in verbal presence. I love that. I love that quietness. I love the Phillips often like what's her name? I'm going to kill everything I'm just going to kill her. There's not like you don't have to scream and shout. There's just an interesting process here, and the weather's coming out. I'm pissed off. That's why I'm in the dark, incel corner. But no, it's the fundamental issue and the most glaring, obvious problem this film has. I don't know if you two. I'm not trying to go into that's not anything to spoil it, but it's just even like you said, Carson, not to spoil the ending. I was like, really? I don't know. It was just like it was funny in a gimmicky way, and I'm like, that's not really what this film is trying to present. This franchise has not presented that. The villains in these pieces are horrendous people who want money. I don't know. I'll move on to you two. I know I'm going on. I'd like to know your two thoughts. I'm going to put the light on now because I'm getting angry.
Good, because that picture of Arnie next to you is fucking terrifying in the dark, and I just keep waiting for the face to like move. It really was quite distracting, to be honest. I agree with you, and I also think the projection of Gabriel's very strange between these two movies, mainly because the first one pretty much sets him up to be like this pawn for this AI program, to where it feels like he's not necessarily in control. He's not like the big bad. He's being played by the AI who is using him. And again, in this one, it really switches those entirely to where this AI program is taking the back seat. Gabriel's trying to control the AI program. It really refocuses him to be the big bad. I assume to try to give a more satisfying payoff for this conclusion. I also will say, I agree with your point earlier. I think the director here is like very clearly trying to force this to be the last film, whether or not anyone else on that set agrees with him. I think as he's writing this and as he's trying to make this big, he is like, no, this is going to be, I'm going to do everything in my power to make this so big that you could not possibly make another one. I think that gets lost in translation and causes some awkward bits. But I just think even the projection of Gabriel within this film, within the threats within this movie, and again, it's the hugest threats you can imagine. It is apocalyptic, as Nick says. Gabriel does not stand tall within that as holding that weight or that commanding power within this narrative, to where even in the context of this film, his conclusion, the fight with him, really feels like the biggest thing going on. Even in that fight, it's not even that like Gabriel's getting away. It's more what that represents for this other conflict. So it's very odd. I would agree with you. Nick, I don't know if you have thoughts on Gabriel.
I don't actually mind Gabriel all that much. I do find I will say side note, I I pray to the cinema gods that we do get an oral history of the entire Mission Impossible series, especially what the hell happened behind the scenes of all of these McHugh films, of like what was supposed to happen and what wasn't. Because, like in terms of production, the first thing they shot for um, Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, before, I think it was still when Nicolò was cast. Like the only thing they managed to shoot or close to that before COVID hit was the jump with the motorbike, which is so crazy. It's just like, okay, first day of filming, let's just jump with the motorbike. Why? We'll figure it out. Okay, let's just do this jump. We will build the narrative around it. I mean, they shot the climax of this film, of Final Reckoning, when Top Gun Maverick was coming out or close. It was like 2022, summer 2022. which is insane in retrospect. I think it was the first thing they shot for the sequel, or at least it's the only thing that we still see from the sequel that was shot back then. Anyway, I don't mind Gabriel that much. I actually like him as this kind of representation of a zealot, of this type of extremist who feels so strong, so confident, and so powerful when he has the backing of, in this case, like this all-knowing AI. And the moment he loses that, he becomes ridiculous. Like he gets bested, like without getting too much into spoilers, like he gets bested in this film early on, and he needs to run away. He turns into this cartoonish villain of sorts, like you said. In a way that kind of fit for me. Like he is ridiculous, therefore ridiculed, and I kind of take it. It's something that plays into Cruise also wanting the audience to feel that level of empowerment and satisfaction, so that when he gets his unexpected, unavoidable comeuppance at the end, you want to cheer. It's slightly over the top, but in a way that's not unlike the end of like Henry Cavill in Fallout, for instance, or um, I actually don't remember how the other villains die, but that's another problem. Um, yeah, no, I don't mind him. I like Jose Morales. It's also kind of weird to think that we're watching this $400 million movie where the climax is about two 60-plus-year-old men chasing each other on planes. It's kind of insane if you think about it. In the best of ways, I will say. In the best of ways.
What they should have done, and I'm going to like, what should have these two massive stars done with their own project? But as a fan, they should have killed Gabriel off in the first film, in Dead Reckoning Part One at the end. Shock the audience, shock the idea of who's going to be the villain for the second one, and then the entity. We get the idea of, because if you watch this film, what the entity does, what the entity said, and you cut Gabriel out, the intensity here against a machine that isn't visible, isn't physical, knows everything, is stopping everything, is about to initiate World War III. Nick said in the opening, is so genuinely frightening about you cannot believe what reality is. Fundamentally overrides anything that Gabriel does in this film. You cannot compete with it because you cannot compete with the unknown. You cannot compete with the idea of a certain computer program that is doing what it's doing, and at the moment it cannot be stopped. It's constantly evolving, and you've got a human element to it who's trying to written to be a conjoining villain. It just doesn't fundamentally as a narrative. It does not work. And I think that there's levels of the writing here where if you're writing a villain like that and you've got that in the background that's constantly emerging as a threat, there's nothing you can do to in a physical manifestation, a visual, to conduct that character to be anywhere more endearing, like endearing in the factor of being horrifying than that computer program. If they would have killed him off in the first film, and as we as an audience expect Ethan Hunt to best this villain as he usually does, and it's like it's over, and then we get like, well, no, this is a sentient being now. This entity is like, all you've done is you've killed the physical manifestation of it in a sense. This, like you said, a zealot or a devout fan to it. I think the intensity then that Ethan, who was what we as an audience project as him winning, killing this main villain, and then it's just something completely different grows now, and it's a threat that he's never faced before. I think that is a far more enriching type of narrative. But that's not. I didn't make this film. It's not my something on the block at all. But that to me feels far more immersive than this. But like I said, I like the performance. I think it's what is presented with is very like minimal, and I think it's intriguing enough, and I like the delivery of often stuff. But it very much is cartoonish, like you said, and it very much is like, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to run away, and it feels like it prolongs the inevitable at that point. It feels like I don't want to compare it, but I watched the first John Wick not so long ago. I remember Shed Sahelski was like, you can't prolong that battle at the end. How can you? You've got someone the Baby Yaga, who you've brought up throughout the last hour and a half. You've presented him as killing machine, and you're going to go against someone who smokes, drinks. He's about 5'4", and he's about 70. You can't do it. You can't even the goalposts. It's going to be over in a matter of minutes. But you have to make it count. Whereas this is similar in sentiment of having like two characters But like you're prolonging the inevitable here. Like, granted, let it have the moment. I think from the moment it starts in Dead Reckoning to the end, I think it works quite well, that intensity, because you don't know who this is. I think you can cut and run then and blossom into this. But anyway, bygones be bygones. It's a missed opportunity, and what's left is every time that character's on screen, this film just grounds to a halt. Its whole finale is like monologue. I'm a bad person. Monologue. I'm intense. Monologue. And I'm just sat there thinking, these films were never built to be like this. Like, I know he's evil. I know he's a shit. And I know he's doing terrible things. You're just repeating the cycle, and I think it's just, I don't know. To that degree, you could argue, well, Jack, it is the last film that they've definitely finished it. I just think there's a lack of an understanding of what this really was going to be, and it's interesting you mentioned about what they first shot in Dead Reckoning, because that's got to be a fundamental rewrite. And there's always the question of when you're going to shoot something back to back, and then it doesn't happen. And it's like because he made comments into the press that said it came out that Paramount said it was postponed, the sequel, and he kept like, no, it's not postponed. We're just doing some more writing. We need to do post. And then the got out of jail free card was that, well, Tom needs to leave and do promotion for Top Gun Maverick, which broke box office records, and so it did. But there's sort of I think there's a slight pause there, thinking, shit, because they were still adding cast members like months before this finished. I'm like, that's always a really bad sign.
I read that they shot one moment from the opening act was shot 3 or 4 months ago.
And that's in London.
With Ailey Atwell. A sequence with Ailey Atwell early on. And you can tell. Like, the first time I was watching, I was like, this sequence is weird. Rewatching it, knowing it, I was like, oh, that's why it's weird. You can feel it's just like written, put together 2 months, 3 months, whatever, before production closes.
There's also definitely the pressure here of like Dead Reckoning Part 1 did like terrible at the box office. It did not have the fan base. It did not have the payoffs. Definitely a reaction there. I will say in this conversation,
it wasn't that bad.
It wasn't good.
It was pretty terrible. I mean, it was to the point where people thought this might even get canceled. Like, it was not good, at the very least. I also will say in this conversation of AI and deepfakes and this entity and how do you personify it, I was really like, oh my god, are we going to see like the personification of some of these previous villains, possibly even Hoffman come up? Very complex, I think, especially with some of the context here, more complex than some of the other times that technology has been used. I think overall I'm happy that didn't happen, but I was just like on the edge of my seat, like, oh my god.
Did you notice, it's not going to spoil it, I don't want to spoil this, but there's a certain meeting of minds, let's say, and someone talks to someone, right? Did you both know, it's not a spoiler, that we'll get into it later, did you not notice how the voice is dubbed with quite a few people? I thought that when you said that, and I was like, oh my god. It's an interesting one, isn't it? But I will say on the AI, I'm glad that someone fucking annihilated it. I'm glad that someone presented it in Hollywood and was like, this thing is bad. I'm not bothered. Like, this thing is bad. We don't want this. And this is not a comment about the film itself. It's inevitable. Sorry, it's not a conversation about like what contextually happens in the film. We'll get onto that a little bit later. But I was so glad that someone in the public was like, fuck this. I don't want this. We don't want this. It is annihilation of what we are as people. You can't have thought, you can't have process. And when it gets to like the nitty gritty of it, and people start getting bums on seats and squeaky, I quite like the factor of like it was not scared to really present something as, you cannot let this thing grow. You cannot let this thing evolve to be able to dictate. And it's a one thing where I think it's quite ballsy to do that, and I think it's probably a bit ahead of its time. The worry is that it probably hasn't made a shy bit of difference. But I was really glad to watch that and be like, I'm hoping that a lot of people watch this and be like, yeah, this is a bad thing. I hope it just works subconsciously, even on a conscious level. I hope it just sort of ingrains on the audience. But can we go into spoilers?
I'd like to respond to that point in the spoiler discussion, though. So let's go into officially, if you've not seen the movie, spoiler discussion from here on out. We're spoiling the end of the film and all the surprises throughout. So go away, please. The issue is they don't kill the AI, though. The issue is Tom Cruise saves it. Because I agree with your conversation and perception overall, but then at the end, they don't actually kill it. And that bothered the fuck out of me.
Yes.
And like, no, do not open that door for like, maybe there's a tool for to use this in the future. I don't care that Tom Cruise really loves movies and might use it to make good movies. No, kill that fucker. I was really frustrated by that choice, to be honest.
Yeah, very strange. The entity. God, so I just said the entity is revealed to be Ethan Hunt's mother, isn't it? I'm not joking. Everyone was like, imagine. But no, go on, sorry, Nick.
I understand why they go in that direction. Like because it's so like the stakes are so high where they actually do say that actually destroying the entity would basically destroy the entire internet, essentially. I don't remember like the cyberspace, whatever. Which would bring everything to literal dark ages. Like so many like hospitals would not be working. The entire economy would collapse in ways we couldn't even fathom. Because the thing is, like, it's either the AI goes rampant, AI is destroyed, or the AI is contained. But who can contain it? Only Tom Cruise can contain it. Only Ethan Hunt, the man, the legend, the Christ, Lord, Savior of everything and everyone. Which is kind of funny. But I do like, speaking of the AI as a whole, now that we're also in spoilers, one problem that I did have with the previous Macquarie films is that as much as the practical stunts are highlighted and are a cornerstone of the franchise at this point, they always manage, especially in the key ones, they always manage to insert so much CGI around them. Whether it's like the thunderstorm in the Halo jump, whether it's reconstructing the entire cliff in CGI in Dead Reckoning, like all of those stunts, that it kind of takes away the visceral intensity of it. It's kind of taken away. I think narratively it still works, and that's why I find them engaging. But they always look at them and think, well, there's so much CGI around them that they're not that impactful. And I like that for the final reckoning, they actually decided to be like, okay, we're not gonna have like 6-7 different stunts in this film. We're gonna have basically just 2.5. And we're gonna just like go full practical as much as we can with them, because I think that's why the Sevastopol descent is that incredible, and that's why I think the climax with the biplanes is so awe-inducing. Even though it's shot a bit too close in some instances, it doesn't have that like digital cleanliness that Fallout had with the 2 helicopters. But it's still amazing. Like I like that with so many movies going. Like there were trailers for Fantastic Four, How to Train Your Dragon, and other nonsense. It's like, sure, people are flying around. Oh my god, look at this, look at that. It's so incredible. And it's all fake. To actually see Cruise finally go full practical to such an extent. Like none of the other movies have had this lengthy sequences. Maybe just like the climax of Fallout, but it's so impressive. I loved every second of those parts.
So I just want to respond to Carson's point about the AI thing. That also really annoyed me as well, because there was a conversation here about where Haley Atwell says, like, you should have it. You should have it. Grace is her name, believe it or not. Grace says, you should have it. You're the only man who can control this. Please. Like we're getting into territory there where, like, and this thing with Alejandro Inarritu, his film about a man like who's causing the end of the world and he needs to save it. I'm like, we're going into the thing where for a long time we've been able to subdue this egocentric religious element to Cruiser's work about being centric Christ. And I think this one just doubled down that, like, like there's a lot with this where he goes on, just remember it's just pain. And I think there's a human factor of a lot of these films, and we've slowly evolved into like, we're going to jump the shark slowly, which I have no issue with. But when at the end, where he's would that character take on that responsibility? Would the character who has the knock list in Mission Impossible 1, who gives it back to the CIA, would he take this? Would the same guy who injects himself with with the poison, the second one, would he do this? With the guy who stole the rabbit's foot and then wanted to know what it was, did he keep that? Like a Ghost Protocol, like there's a lot here. Like, would this character do that? I don't think in the narrative of Ethan Hunt's arc he would feel comfortable in keeping that so much power. He even says it himself. So what changes his mind in this film? Again, it's incredibly underwritten. When you get to the finale where he has it broken, where Kildridge is there, And I'm like, oh, right, like, and we're doing like, that's such a homage as well to For Your Eyes Only, the James Bond film with Roger Moore. It's so fucking obvious. Like, and I don't mind that. Like you said, the Cold War stuff is brilliant. But I just thought to myself, you, we're playing with fire here. And I think, again, it's probably a hindsight thing where AI has evolved since this has been filmed, don't get me wrong. But we're talking about something here where, you're maintaining this viewpoint that AI, this entity, is the villainous piece of all villainous pieces, and then you've got it in got a USB drive, and you're gonna do what with it? I don't know. Granted, you'll probably just put it away and it'll never be seen again. But there's an opportunity there to like stamp your authority on this, and I think you're right, Carson. I think there's an open window there, but like let's just see how the culture takes this, and let's see how the society takes it, and the cinematic landscape, the medium, and we'll play it then, because you can open up episode 9 with him smashing it or whatever. But so what now then? Like, what? And then another one, there's always that there though. Is he going to break out? Like, I don't know. To me, it was like, just call it a fucking day. If you're going to end the fucking thing, end it. But that's like just really annoying me. But the one thing that like genuinely was worrying is when we get the opening montage with a news thing, and you get those two things, like the entity, like they're both dead behind my eyes. The entity is, I'm like, oh my, we're in trouble here. We are in trouble, because the performance of them two was like, where have you found these two from the gutter? Like, at the end, like I know what like it's just so on the nose. It's so on the nose, and this is only like 2 months after the finale, Dead Reckoning. Like, what's happened in 2 months? Like, have we poisoned the water or something? Like, we're having like religious fucking dedicated slaves to this thing that we don't, because it's just ballooned and we're not there to find out. If it was a Star Wars film, we'd find it in a fucking novel. Like, it's just like you've got slithers of information here, and instead of like bridging that 2-month gap or starting exactly where you cut off from, you give it like a 45-minute homage. And genuinely, I appreciate, Nick, you got emotional with it. I found it quite sickening. Like, I'm not, I don't mind anyone's response to it. But I was sat there, and my mum and dad were like glazed over like that, and I just sat there and I thought, how patronising. Like, how
He's being
patronising. Like,
thanked for his
that should have been,
service, Jack.
should have
He's
been,
being
no,
thanked
stop
for
it,
30 years of
stop it.
service.
I will be heard. I will be heard. I will be heard. No, I'm joking. To me, that's like a trailer. That's a teaser trailer. It should have been the teaser trailer. Like, don't show any footage. You don't know what's going to happen. Have that in the cinema. You have him in almost in the dark. You have that whole trailer. You have Angela Bassett narrate it, and you see all these flashbacks, and bang, it cuts back to him, and you see his eyes. That's the trailer. It doesn't need to be in the film. I don't need to see one sequence of a John Woo movie which he doesn't like, and this film shits on it massively. That's another thing I have a red flag with this. You're going to do that. De Palma gets his flowers. JJ gets his flowers. Brad Bird gets a little bit. Macquarie obviously gets loads. But John Woo in this is like, what happened in the year 2000 with this film? Because I'm like, do we acknowledge that where's Tandewi Newton in this? Like, are we going to acknowledge the film where they went to Australia? They saved the world. Why are we not acknowledging that? I know Anthony Hopkins turns up in like a flashback here, but to me it was just a bit too on the nose. I thought it was quite patronising. I thought a flashback of a flashback that happened 3 minutes early was like, what are we doing here? Like, this is a crew who substantiate craft to a point where I'm like, this sets the tone. You set the precedent. And I'm watching like, you have no confidence in your product. And that's not just for me. Probably more so is for me. I think more for an average audience. I don't think they give a shit, to be fair. But someone who like watches movies day in day out, I'm not saying you two don't at all. I'm just saying from a personal opinion. That is a massive red flag for me. Once you do that in a film, I'm just sat there going like, and I know people are going to go, well, Jack, one of your favourite filmmakers did that with a new release. Yeah, I suppose, but there's a conflict there where there's a contextual interest of repeating the past. This one's a bit more different because that one's more meta. This one's about matter of fact. And to me, it just felt like a little bit too much of a love fest. That being said, once the first 45 minutes disappear and we get into it, I think it blossoms. I really do. And I think that the festival set piece, I'm going to say this now, is a standout of the year. There's no doubt that I can see that being replaced whatsoever. I think is
You haven't
excellent.
seen Ballerina yet. Let's just not make any
Stop yourself
crazy
before we go
claim.
there.
She
Because the
uses a
trailer appeared of that.
flamethrower.
Yeah, the trailer appeared of that, and I'm like, I'm not going back. And then John Wick like says something like, I'm like, Len Wiseman has not got a very good track record, ladies and gentlemen. We'll leave that there. However, you know, once you lose that ability to have self confidence in a product such as this, which is going to go for above and beyond. And granted, there are interesting aspects in the two big set pieces of Tom Cruise here. I have no dialogue from him, which I thought was incredibly interesting. It's a physical representation of being something. I think the Sevastopol thing is genuinely, like I said, probably what the highlight of the year. It will undoubtedly be. It's non-verbal. It's constantly diegetic music with a bit of score thrown in, but it's mostly diegetic music.
20 minutes
Terrific.
long.
Yes, a whole chunk, and it really does flavour the mood, the taste. It's prolonged, it's really drawn out, but it needs to be for the intensity of the atmosphere. And when he gets into that tight hole there, my mum next to me went like ooh like that, like she was like physically and emotionally involved in that. Like it's just terrific. I felt none of that in the climax, none. And maybe it's more of a water thing and a close proximity, which I think how they oppose each other. You've got an intensity of claustrophobia, and the other one is we're constantly moving everywhere. Ethan in the first let's say set piece is trapped. There's a claustrophobia to it. The opposing nature of the final sequences. We've got this open air. We're constantly moving, but he can't keep still. I love that sort of that texture to it. But oh dear me, is that just so anticlimactic? It's like we've got two biplanes. I think the scene blocking of all that is very strange as well. There's camera work there that's like close up, medium, close up, medium, close up. It's like, and granted, I suppose with how that's structured, that sequence, it's very difficult to get an establishing shot or a wide shot of them together because it just doesn't really work, But the whole thing was like, and then you cut back to some morons who we don't have any interest about, the trio. Like the three who I know I'm going on here, and please, I'll forgive me, but
I care
the three
about them.
oh my
I
god,
care
stop!
about
The
the
three with
trio.
the nuclear weapon, give up. How boring!
Oh yeah,
Like,
and
what?
the
Oh my god,
doggo and
like
his
he shot on him
wife.
30 years ago. Please, who like that is just so fan. Like how like oh my god, what such a coincidence when he turns up. Have the 2 minutes
I
of
was
fame and
served.
fuck off.
I'm a fan and I was served.
No, no, no. It needed to be presented for 10 seconds and fuck off, please. Because the whole sequence is like, you're not going to kill them because it's just, there's no sentimentality with it. We're going to get rid of them. We don't care. The one thing I was worried about the Luther thing, that was so well done. So, honestly, that is heartfelt. That is, the Ving Rhames has been the unspoken soldier of these films. He's so poetic and such a fundamentally great actor as well. Terrific. And this just showed how good he is. And I think they should have done the same with Simon Pegg as well. Get him off the fuck as well. Get rid of him. Really like take everyone away. Seriously, just get rid of him. And I was like, go for it. Just go for it. Bring in the new team. Just go for it. Have him go into the Jim Phelps. We'll get onto that one in a minute because that really pissed me off. But we'll get there a little bit later. Because granted, I really like this film, but the misgivings here are so tonally inept. It's like, and like the tear down the eye. Oh my god, it's Tom Cruise. It's the Magnolia Tom Cruise. Like, my god, deliver a fucking monologue. We're here. It's like, but you're James Phelps. You're Jim Phelps Jr. I'm like, oh, but please,
I will
really?
say, of all of the fan service in this movie and the references and stuff, I can overlook some of them. Making Shea Wiggum the son of Jim
Oh,
Phelps is the only one where I'm like, why? Why
why
do we
have
need more
why
emotional
have
connection? We already have so much intensity from the previous film. Like the entire chase cat and mouse from the previous film is enough for him. Do we need this connection as well? This like Ray
well,
Skywalker nonsense.
oh, don't please. But the fact of like the Vanessa Kirby thing being, what's her face's daughter from the first film. I'm
Vanessa
like,
Redgrave, Max.
yeah, I'm just like, Okay,
But that's a
like
throwaway. That's just throwaway,
or
which is fine.
it is, but it's like it's just weird texture on a film that does not need it. You don't need to make this world smaller. The whole extravagant nature of these features is that we're in Dubai one day, we're in Bilbao the next, we're in Sevilla, we're in South Africa, we're in Africa. You know, we're in Singapore, we're in China. You know, we're in England. Like there is extravagant nature to that. We can be anywhere with all these different characters. Why go back on it on the final thing to make this like, oh well, he's related to here, she's related to this, and then not even bring Vanessa Kirby back? Like, what strange thing to do. But going back to the point of like the anticlimactic, the whole Gabriel thing as well. It's like that's just gimmicker, and it was like it got like a sort of like stuttered laugh in my auditorium. It was like, huh. And then I was like, and then everyone realised like what that was just pointless. And it's like momentarily like relief, and it's just like you just don't get any animosity there. And granted, going back to like Hayley Atwell and the other actress, I'm just what they did with Grace here is there's no reference to Rebecca Ferguson in this. Like 2 months after, like his flame has died, his equal who should have taken this franchise on. I'm so sorry. What a missed opportunity. Get Tom Cruise as AMF director. Get him on there. Let Rebecca Ferguson take this on. She's so capable of it. If you want Jez back, Mr. Renner, bring him back. You know, but Alec Baldwin's gone. We don't need him anymore. You know, you've got this foundation, and they just don't take any they don't take any advantage with it. But the whole conviction of the finale to me was just very strangely crafted. I would love to know. You said did you, no, I didn't say that. I wonder when that was in production. The finale. I wonder if it was earlier on, in the middle, at the end. I'd be fascinated to know.
Early on. Early on. It was 2022. They shot everything with the biplanes. And something that shocked me, because it did feel green. Like, as I Morales, I was like, he's 100% not on those planes. Apparently, he was. Apparently, he was like actually physically in the plane. He did his stunts there. I bet your ass he did not do the stunt where he's hanging like for the skin of his teeth before dying,
Oh
because you
no.
can tell the way the wind is impacting his face is completely different to the way it impacts Tom Cruise's face. But anyway, apparently he was on the plane, so he was always
Yeah,
meant to be there. It's not something they did like two
I
months ago
mean,
or something.
it just fundamentally making a film, having the end as your beginning point is sort of an interesting one because you can travel to that. But you know, once you do that and you go along the way, you start writing. You're like, oh, this scene's great, and I think you've got to meet that finale. And I don't think it works very well here. I think I just think it's just. I mean, the more I talk about this film, the more I become frustrated with it because I think as a finale, I think it's quite difficult to take. Like you said, I have a fundamental issue with this being a finale because once you state yourself as that, I as a fan or as a moviegoer expect certain things to happen, and not in a terms of like I expect Ethan Hunt to die. I just expect an idea of like if you're going to take it, like go down, like fucking set the thing ablaze, like just go for it. And there's aspects to this where I'm like, the connective tissue, the new forming of a crew, killing people off, keeping the entity. It can't make its mind up, and for me as an audience member, I find that quite not I find it quite not patronising, but I find it somewhat condescending as well. It's like you can't have your cake and eat it. I don't even. In actual fact, I don't really see this as the end anyway. I think it's definitely not full stop. But there are so many misgivings with this in narrative. The ADR, I mentioned it earlier, is genuinely shocking. The whole first 40 minutes to this is like, I was like watching, I was like, am I having a fucking stroke here? Like, I'm definitely seeing what I'm seeing. And everyone's like, I'm like, what is going on? Like, why is nothing synced up properly? And it's always in the dark. It's like really darkly shot. I don't know. There's the more I'm not getting into a Tenet situation here, but I just think that more you look at it fundamentally, the misgivings here are so obnoxiously apparent compared to anything else. And I'm just trying to, in real time, figure out if that's a production issue, if it's an issue of trying to hit a target, or it's an issue of trying to craft satisfaction. And I think all those things together do not make a very appetizing satisfaction, let's say, or something that melds together to make the glue here is just the craft. And I do really like this because I think in an era now of just wanting to have entertainment, I think a lot of stuff is just CGI bullshit. I'll move on because I know I'm talking absolute shite now. I'm sorry for keeping everyone, but when you compare this to, I promise you this is not. I'm not going to go into this, but I'm just going to have to make this a point. When you look at something like Hobbs and Shaw, and you watch this, it is apples and oranges in terms of league. Like there's like the Conference League, and then there's the fucking Premier League with this. And I'm not trying to compare the two. You want your KFC, and then you go down to a back street and you have fried chicken shops. Like there's a difference. I'm not saying KFC is top-tier food, by the way, but the comparison still remains. I just expect a level of craftsmanship in this that I don't think this reaches the ideal that it sets apart from everything else. It's still very, very good. It's still indeedly entertaining. There are moments in this where, granted, I was like, oh God, it's like I feel physically and emotionally responsive to the work. But as something that is at a certain pinnacle of the craft, and this, please come into this because I cannot go on anymore. I think I might have an aneurysm, but I need to get a bottle of water. But I just think that at the pinnacle of what I expect from these two people, I have to say it does underwhelm. That being said, I still think in a franchise 8 films deep, it's not the worst, and I think it's still stellar entertainment. And to that degree, an 8th film, you can't really complain. So there's like a distance of me wanting to be frustrated, but I'm also I'm appealing to the nature of its issues and also its circumstance. And any other film, I do think this would have gone. I really do think this would have gone down the shitter. But I think that you've got two majorly dedicated craftsmanship here, a producer and a director, who have managed to just about sail this back into the harbour and it doesn't sink. And to that degree, this film is a roaring success. Please take over. Please annihilate this as more as you want. I don't think I can go on more as a personal riot.
Well, I'll just say, I think both of you would disagree with this statement to a point, but I think the flaws you are mentioning, and yes, there's a lot of like unique flaws to the film. I think it's this director. I felt this way about like every single one of his films within this franchise, that the writing is never good. The plots are never really that well constructed. Nick, I know you're going to disagree. I said that at the top. You can't be shocked. It's always, and as Jack mentions when he recounts how much he likes Fallout, it's always those action sequences and the set pieces that blow your breath away, that are, wow, that is what I remember. Like when you go back, and especially Fallout, because I loved Fallout in the theater, saw it in IMAX, great experience. Rewatching it for Dead Reckoning right before it came out, I was like, oh, it is fun in the action, but like the writing is just not there. I think these are faults that we've seen from this director multiple times at this point. This might be the most glaring example of it. But I don't think this is necessarily unique just to Final Reckoning. I also will say, I just want to back up with what Jack said at the end there. Again, you can have these faults, but I think when it comes to just pure entertainment, compare this to any of the recent Fast and Furiouses, any of the recent MCUs, of like the big blockbusters. When it comes like, yes, we can break this down and have all this plot discussion. I do think it's worthwhile just to recognize, though, like this is some stellar action. It's very entertaining. For a 3-hour film, outside those first 40 minutes, I never felt the length of this thing in a negative way. I want to recognize that as a blockbuster for entertainment purposes. Again, I don't think we've seen something this good, probably since at least Top Gun Maverick, and before Top Gun Maverick for quite a while before that. So I just want to recognize that also in this conversation.
Sorry, Carson, did you say the writing was bad?
Yes.
The same
I can
person
take
who wrote,
this if you want.
The same person who wrote 2017's The Mummy. You sure? Writing bad? I'm sorry. Go on.
Did he write this?
Hey,
no.
Check out the full episode of that.
Yeah. He is like a writer on that. I'm sure he's credited.
Oh, he did rewrites. Yeah. I forgot about that.
And that film was a roaring success. Please.
We have our full ClapperCast episode. Go check it out.
Yeah.
No, I will
Another
say
one, Nick, that for some reason you missed that episode. I don't know why, but alas, take it away.
I've already seen that movie like 3 times. I don't remember where I was, but it was just like
That's not a good
serendipity
enough
that I couldn't
excuse.
rewatch it.
That's not a good enough excuse.
It is to be okay. No, but speaking of Macquarie, I do really. I've listened to him talk for literal hours at this point. Whether it's the commentary tracks, the things he's done for Empire, I do admire him a lot. I would say he's both a great director, just like generally speaking, like you mentioned, Jack. Like in anyone else's hands, this would have been Rise of Skywalker. Like let J.J. Abrams do this, it would have been terrible. Yes, Carson, I'm going there. Okay, hot take. Rise of Skywalker doesn't work. No, but even in terms as a writer, I would say he's not necessarily a great writer in normal dialogue per se, even though he has moments of brilliance. I think like they in this film at least, like the ending of Luther, like the end monologue of Luther, I think is deeply touching. There's a couple instances here and there that really do work, but where I think he's a very great writer is just in structure, motivations, and keeping the story going. I think it's less a problem of Macquarie, more a problem of just Mission Impossible as a franchise. It's something that he himself has acknowledged. It's like you do need the exposition. Like you actually cannot, like there's no way to work around it. Like this is not an art house series where you can just have no explanation to what's happening. You need it. How do you do it? You need the dialogue. You need moments of people just sitting around and talking about what they have to do. Otherwise, it's absolute nonsense and it's impossible to figure out. And the idea of starting from the ending of like, okay, we have the action set piece, how do we get there, and retroactively building the story around that kind of works, because that's actually what's recommended of almost any screenwriter. Like you need to know the ending of your movie if you want to know how you get there. Okay, so I'm going to end the movie here. Where's the best point to start, and how do you retroactively get to the beginning from there? That's the movie. um it usually works better, I think, especially like in Fallout. It's just like, opening scene, he gets the mission briefing, you know what the mission is, include the stakes, this is what's going to happen, cut the credits and go on. I think here the credits are put at like a very odd spot, with the Haley Atwell scene. It's like that's a bit weird. I think it could have but also, where do you put it when Luther is died? Yay, Ving Rhames is dead. Let's just have the opening credits with exciting music. It's one of those things where ultimately you have things that you need to have, and you just like do them. It's something that I admire of him, because I've seen interviews even where you can tell that McQuarrie's like, yeah, I know this movie's not perfect. This is literally the best we could do, which I get. Like for everything outside of like the Jim Phelps thing, because that's inexcusable. Um, but outside of that, everything else, I'm like, okay, it is a problem. There's also no easy solution, or at least the solution should have been scrap everything you've done until this point and completely redo it. I also think like Esa Morales was. This is just conjecture of my part, allegedly, but like no, Esa Morales was very anti-vax during the COVID era when they were shooting as well Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, and afterwards especially was very vocal about that. And so people were joking about like, haha, who's gonna be in less of final of the next film, part two. Actually is literally in just the opening of the film and the final part. Like that's it. He's nowhere for almost like 2 hours of the film. Um, so maybe that played into that, considering that Cruise, like that's one of the reasons why the movie is so expensive. That's something I think needs to be acknowledged, is that it's so expensive because they were paying the crew full time during the lockdowns, during the writer's strike. That's incredibly commendable. When people were saying it's saving the film industry with this and Top Gun Maverick, it's because it was still paying people when they were not working, because of true catastrophes that were happening in the world, compared to other studios and other productions that had people lose health insurance, lose job stability. So yeah, we shall see if this ends up actually being a proper commercial success. It is the biggest opening day for any Mission Impossible film, which is great to read. Um, I also think it's such surprisingly so. I would say it's working really well for non-fans of the series, which I was not expecting. I saw this in a sold out IMAX crowd. Not only was there a lovely like single sigh of relief during the cut to black when everything ends at the end, when like the world is saved and it just like cuts to black for 5 seconds. There was a lovely cut to black and just like a sigh of like, ah. It's like all the tension of the climax just released by people. But I was listening to, like, most of the people that I heard complaining were fans of the franchise, because otherwise I had people around me who were like, "Oh wow, like this was just a great film! Like, oh my god, it was so exciting! Oh my god, I was so scared when he was in the submarine! Oh my god, like how did he do that?" Like, the excitement was palpable. I think it is one of those cases where it's just like, you know, Tom Cruise says it himself in this film. You spend way too much time on the internet. Like, we are way too much in that, like, the culture of these bubbles of just like negativity and nonsense, and just like da 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 da, think this, think that. It's like people are liking this film. Like, at my screening, I was listening to normal audiences being like, "Yeah, it takes a bit to start, but then after that, it's just amazing." And that's it. I was like, great. Like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's gonna have legs, and I think it's going to be better received than I originally thought. Like, even I don't like Rotten Tomatoes, but it's been getting good reviews there from audiences. Like, general of like, do people like it or not? It's like, people are liking it. So I don't know. I'm pleasantly surprised by that, I have to say, despite all of the flaws and the messiness of the film.
My parents,
Crowd
who
pleasing.
are not like really like big on the internet either, like I said, I go take them to watch like tentpole movies, so get them out of the house. Not like they're invalids or anything, just just get them out of the house. Um, they said the same complaints. Like, it's quite long, but it was really like action packed. My dad was like loved the submarine stuff. He's like, oh, like even he was like in awe of the finale. I agree with that. I think it will have legs. I think I think there's, first of all, there's nothing else really like it out there. It's like a PG-13 or 12 anyway, so you've got really great audience traction. I think the fact that they're advertising it as the end, there's always going to bring a slightly bigger audience and just to see, or the climax in itself. But enough of the positives. I have to get on to Haley Atwell here, right? And what a very strange vessel of a character, because it's the one weak link for me where I'm like, oh, that's clearly not meant. That's clearly written for someone else. And I think you can tell that during production, I think there was an issue of like, I don't think there's certain people. Again, this is conjecture on my part, but I think there's an idea of there's about an imbalance of where they wanted this to go, what they wanted it to represent in the finale, and what the future lied. For me, this is a franchise that has repeatedly tried to find the next second coming of Christ in the fact of Cruise himself. The first was Jonathan Rhys-Meyers. The second one was obviously Jeremy Renner. And then you get into Rogue Nation and you get into Rebecca Ferguson. And I think this has always been a Tom Cruise thing, but I think they've always tried to find the one of balance. And the interesting is that the second lead, or the second big lead, has never really come back, perhaps to test audiences to see if they like them. But also, I think that there's a lot of power to that. I think Rebecca Ferguson, who was in 3 of these, survived the most because I think she was really entertaining. She was a Tom Cruise, Ethan Hunt like character, disavowed by her agency, blackmailed and bankrupted to have to work against the principles, and then found common ground with someone else who had to be in the same position as her. I think fundamentally, as this audience grow with that character, I think it works in this what they do in Dead Reckoning. I think in context of that, I think if you're going to have one go and it be a surprise, that's the gut punch. But for me, I think that Haley Atwell character is given far too much weight of a character that we don't know, who's a fucking pickpocket, and then all of a sudden is like in a decompression, whatever it is, box, stroking his face, all very very sensual and very very like emotional, trying to engage in this character. It will they won't they, will they won't they, and you just watching like, how is this person who 3 months ago was just stealing things at a fucking airport now, saving the world, like that to me. And I'm not taking anything with Haley Atwell as an actress. I think she's quite good here, but the character arc in itself to me is like, we're throwing a considerable amount of weight on a character here, and it doesn't play with the fish out of water aspect to it. Like, she's finding her feet. She seems to be incredibly well sophisticated here. Not only in the beginning, right, and this is where the writing gets very strange, is she scared to death that she's going to be murdered, and that when we cut to the credit, she's like, oh my god, like, he's like, don't worry, pain, it's just pain. And then you get to a fight sequence later on, and she's fucking John Wick. She's like Mexican judo, you don't know you're messing with, like all sorts of stuff. I'm like, well, hang on a second here. Like your principal character is like scared to death they're gonna die, and she's like has no idea how to fight a way out of a paper bag, and then we've got her doing kung fu and karate, and I'm just thinking to myself, you know, that's just the idea of that very poor writing, like putting it on screen and it not making much sense. And yes, to the average moviegoer, that's not going to make a bit of difference. But to me, I again, I put these films on a pedestal, I don't think it should be making those type of mistakes. And the emotional interest of that character is like, oh, it just feels like that was meant to be Rebecca Ferguson, and she's meant to take the mantle. And I think in later years, I think that's going to be such a severely missed opportunity because how interesting Hayley Atwell is here. I just think it's a character that is given a substantial amount of weight and a substantial amount of character study and time, but you don't actually find very much about her. You don't really care about her. She doesn't really do anything. And then when she does, it's like the pinnacle of all pinnacles of saving the world. It's an interesting writing there of like we'll put it on Grace's shoulders. I'm just thinking to myself, it's just a very strange idea to have done that in the writing process, if it's in production or during filmmaking, to then we'll have Grace save him, but he's only known this person for 3 months. I don't know. I don't know how you two felt that, but it just felt like just throwing it into the into the lion's mouth. Like I don't know. I don't know how you two felt about it, but that character to me was like just very strange. It just seemed to be like given an incredible amount of credence and an incredible amount of material, and probably similar to like I don't know Gabriel as well. It just very strangely written in the fact of like there's it here, and because you mentioned about the prologue or the flashback to when he's running. I know that there's like on the cutting through floor. There's like quite a few deep fakes of him as like a 25-year-old, and he had to change how he ran because that's not a 55-year-old Tom Cruise running. I like the detail there, and it's quite interesting. I like the fact that you don't know why Gabriel's killing that woman. I like the fact that you don't know why Tom Cruise and that woman, Maria, are interested. I hope that's her name now. I know that you don't. There's not like an incentive to know. I like the fact that all of them have been given a choice. You don't need to know who they were. But we all know by the principles of how they follow their lives. They're trying to save the world, and they care about each other, and they're willing to go to the end of the world to save anybody who it matters. How that just by that line is like, oh, that's really interesting. I don't need to know who they were. I know who they are now. I like that simplistic. But when you're bringing characters in for like the eighth movie, you've got to give it a bit more substance. I don't know how you two felt about that.
Yeah, I don't. I didn't mind it too much, because I just really liked Grace as a character in the previous film. I found her to be very different from Rebecca Ferguson, from Elsa. So it didn't bother me that she was like more cocky, a bit of a flirt, but never romantically interested in Ethan. Even rewatching this film, because I was talking to some people who were like, oh, they did Rebecca Ferguson 30 and they tried to turn her into a love interest now. It's like I still don't feel that much. I mean, she has to resuscitate him with mouth to mouth. It's like that's kind of it though. It's
That's what
less
gets you going. Yeah.
when he's dead, when he's not moving. Consent, no, always consent first, people. No, but it's very funny. Just like it plays with less into a romantic interest in Ethan and more into what you were saying of like this godlike figure, and she's just a believer. It's like, oh my god, you're perfect. You're the new Jesus, the second coming. Um, but I don't mind her. I think she's fine. I just think my main problem, I would say that the problems you have with her, I would extend to the entire team, where they just don't have that much to do because the runtime is so long and there's so many new characters to introduce and things to do and things to say. They ultimately don't do much, like introducing Degas, who was already in the previous film. I found him to be a nice foil. With the Shea Wiggum character Briggs, it was like it doesn't do much in this film. I like that he's around.
Hmm.
Everything he has to do is just ask questions. Why are we doing this? Who is that person? What does this mean? Is that's it? It doesn't do anything else in the film. Paul Clementif, I think she is outstanding in the previous film. I really like her here. She has
Mm.
barely anything to do outside of saving Simon Pegg at the end. Simon Pegg has barely anything to like. It just kind of like repeats, and I think it's fine. Again, the dynamic when those scenes are happening between the group are fine, but they're not great. Like, I think that's why I say I still really love the movie. I had a ton of fun with it, even rewatching it, but it would never be among the best of the series because it doesn't have that dynamic that's just core to the series. It doesn't have a lot of the humor that can be hit or miss, but it just is not there, even though there's some funny parts. You don't have those moments of like genuine bonding. Everything is very serious. It's very heavy. That it kind of takes away some of the inherent excitement of the series, I would say, which is a bit of a shame, but also it's something I can accept to enjoy this film for what it is. I don't know if it makes sense.
Carson, can I just jump in really quick? I promise you,
Yeah,
I've
go
got
for it.
about 10 seconds. How did you describe Grace as a character when you opened that statement? That you said she's flirtatious, she's bubbly, how did you describe her? Sorry.
I'd say like she's very confident,
Yeah,
very
flirtatious.
very flirty. Yeah,
Right. That's Vanessa Kirby in Dead Reckoning. That's why she's not in this film because
in Fallout as well.
yeah, and I think that's another strange one. I think that character feels like groomed to become that in a way that she gets given the choice, and I think the Haley Atwell one is also a sort of an interesting misdirection. I think that again, there's a lot here where it's just not very thought out because I think how you described that and Grace very much describes Vanessa Kirby for me. I think there's an interesting character there going back full circle. Her mother was as a villain in a certain way, or playing the game and the train and Dead Reckoning Part One. Like there's an interest like how they have to use her. But I felt, and especially in Fallout, what she's doing. I suppose you can't really redeem that type of character to the degree that they probably need to in Grace. I think it's a lot easier to do that in Grace rather than Kirby's character. But I feel that was the trajectory. I think to bring Haley Atwell in, you can't have Vanessa Kirby then because they're just too similar in thematic and things. So I think that's why I just wanted to put on. That's primarily probably the reason why Kirby's not here. But sorry, Carson, I don't want to interrupt. Sorry.
Well, to be fair, I think Kirby had like scheduling conflicts, so like it
What
was on
with?
Kirby's side, I believe.
What with?
And she
So,
still shot scenes,
Fantastic Four,
allegedly.
Oh, no, I'm just
probably.
joking. I've never heard of
Oh,
that
Al-
film. We won't.
allegedly,
I
she did
wish I
shoot
wish I was
scenes
in the
for
same
this
boat.
film, allegedly, but then they were
Say that again.
cut.
Sorry, again. Sorry.
Allegedly, they shot scenes of her for this film of Vanessa Kirby, but then they were
Mm.
cut. Which actually, like, fun fact, probably you know it already, but for listeners, she was supposed to be present at the climax in Fallout. Like, there are on-set photos of her in the village in Kashmir. She was
Oh
there.
wow.
They cut her
There's a
out.
lot going on there, though, isn't there? There's a lot going on there. I can understand that.
I'm gonna be so happy when a book comes out with like all of this information. I need people to break NDAs for our entertainment. I want hard facts.
I don't think
I
you,
want the
I
facts
don't
of
think you'll
what
be getting that
happened
on
in
a
all
Tom
those
Cruise
films.
production, unfortunately.
Very true. Sad.
But I agree with both of your points. I think as a team, it also is frustrating that Ethan Hunt is so separated from them for so long. Like, I actually
Hmm.
think that team that gets established, I think like Simon Pegg has a good moment when they get to the island and everything. But I think as far as developing that team, I didn't mind the entertainment part that you're kind of mentioning because I find just in the premise, it's so absurd that you kind of have to laugh at it if you take it fully seriously. Like, I don't really know what you're doing there. Like, it's insane what is being presented. The whole submarine bit is like it's a great action scene, but it's also hilarious with how far they try to take it and how absurd it gets, especially towards the end of that, to where like I think you have to laugh at that naturally. But I think if you want to develop this team, and also it's like with your credit, like as far as Ferguson and stuff, like and this film being like the conclusion, it's kind of very similar to my issue with Gabriel, is where you're trying to present these characters as being like this is the definitive final moment, but we've not grown to feel that emotional connection to them because they are new. So you have a warring ideal there where you want this to feel like it has this gravitas and it has this, oh, this is the moment. These are the characters. This is the moment of tenderness for Ethan and this woman. But the woman we don't care about because she's not been here. That's not the weight of that is not like Rebecca Ferguson would be. So I agree with both of your points there for sure.
Do you two want more?
No,
No.
I'm fine. I
Really?
again, it's something that I said about John Wick Chapter 4, which is why I'm very upset they announced Chapter 5. I think you have to know when it's early. When you're high on top, just get out. Just get out. That's something they should have done with Fallout. Fallout was such a high peak. And again, I'm super happy we got that Reckoning. I'm very happy we have Final Reckoning. I really do enjoy these films. They could have stopped. I think there's no shame in reaching a peak and stopping. I think that's something that Marvel should have done with Avengers. I think that's something that so many franchises should have learned. You reach a high point, you dip out. But that's also when you don't make enough money. It's like, oh man, we got so much money out of this, we need to make more. Like Fallout was almost $1 billion movie, which is insane to think about right now, honestly. Even back then, it was very surprising. Um, I don't think this is even gonna get close to that, but we'll see. But no, I don't even know what I want. Do I want them to continue with like some of these characters? Maybe Tom Cruise is a handler. Do we want like a full reboot? They kind of already done the legacy thing with this film, so we're not gonna get a legacy sequel of any kind. Thank God. I don't know. I would really be happy if Cruise and McQuarrie do their small scale action film, whatever, like set on a bus or something. I don't remember. They've like a film that sounds very fun and small scale. I'd love them to do that, and then I'd love this to just stay dormant for at least 10 years, because you also have the problem that Fast and Furious has. Fast and Furious is a cartoon that's getting increasingly sillier. They've literally gone to space at this point. Like, what more can you do? Speaking of stunts, like what more can you do? Even here, trying to do new things, it's actually just doing things they've already done, but for longer. Remember the scene in Rogue Nation where he's underwater for 6 minutes changing the thing? Now he has to go underwater for 20 minutes in the ocean. It's like, okay, what after that? What's gonna go be after that? Oh, it's flying off a airplane, like jumping on a biplane. What more can you do after that? Like, I think even creativity is kind of, I don't want to say it
Mhm.
dies after a while, but it's so hard to keep up the intensity. It has to be small scale. Has to be. Go
And I
back to the
don't think this film,
origins.
yeah, I don't think these films can be built like that either. I don't think you can. I don't think you can go back to the stakes of Mission. I mean, you can do, but I agree with you. I think you either lay this dormant for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, see what the market's like, and then revive it if you see fit, if the working relationship's still there. But then you can't have one without the other because you won't get JJ back. Hope to God you never get him back because that man is gone. I don't know where he's gone, but that man is dead to me. I don't know what horrible filmmaker. Brad Bird has been like direct to jail forever. I don't know what the hell. I think he's either owes someone money or he's done something terrible in a past life. Macquarie sort of like single-handedly revived this with Cruz, but managed to steady the ship. Like I said about being able to just take it home, and it's docked now. And there's nothing wrong with the ship. You can go out on another voyage. But I think at the time now, I think the sailors are weary. Sorry, I think that they've got sea legs. This analogy is going on far too deep, but I think just let it rest and then see what the water's like. Because again, Cruz the next 5 years has got some interesting lineups. And I think he'll either push this back or he'll be pushed to do it. And I think it'll be interesting to see what the difference is because he's not pushed to have made this, and the way this went is slightly lackluster in a sense. From what we've discussed today, so seeing him as a producer, not like Mission Impossible 3 where it had to work, and the other ones have worked and done well. If things go awry for his career, and they won't do, but if they go awry and people are like, yeah, you make American made, but like we just want to go back to Mission Impossible. If he is forced to do this because money talks, I don't think we've seen him in a position with this franchise in having to dictate to an audience, or the audience have to dictate to him. I don't know what this looks like because once you start doing that, then you have to bring back A, you have to bring back B, C, you have to do this. And this film, on a level, like you said, it almost touches on the legacy to begin with. So even as a legacy sequel in 10 or 8 to 10 years, what you're going to bring James Phelps Jr. back? What? Like there's an interesting thing where they take that because you make legacy out of a legacy that didn't really have a legacy. Like who's interested of watching Vanessa Kirby's character in 10 years? I wonder what they got up to. There's a lacking narrative here because everything is an episodic venture by these two as well. It's a very strange predicament. It's such an interesting dichotomy of where this could go. I agree with you too. 8 goes at this. I don't think there's a bad one. I think you just have to now just put it to bed, and just see what the future holds, and come back to it in 10 or 8 years, and just see. And the big one will be what happens with. I know we're close on time here, but the big one will be what happens with Bond at Amazon. If that comes out and it blows up, we're gonna, and it takes the market, then this will dictate what happens to Mission Impossible, because the Bourne films took the James Bond mantle, and then they died of death when these got resurrected. I think the 3 franchises are interestingly connected. They're all very different sentimentalities of craft and how production, the editorials, everything about them are so distinctly different. They have different projects of ideologies, but they all come in cycles. It'd be interesting to see, and they're all on ice now. It'd be interesting to see in the modern era which one takes the mantle and which one carries on. The money probably would be on Bond, but you can never let this go. 8 films in a franchise to get this, that is one hell of an achievement. That Potter had 7. Harry Potter had 7. James Bond's had 20 whatever, and I think some of them are a question mark. For a longevity, I mean, Fast X, whatever that. What do you think? Do you think they survived over the dam? I would like to think they did, but there's not really a question mark there. That film's died a long time ago. I think this one still has a lifeblood. And I think, as much as it pains me to say, like, oh, it's done, I'm quite happy with that. We've got 8 fantastic films, episodic features that feel distinctive, different in aesthetic and texture. We've got a Brian De Palma Mission Impossible movie. It's the one thing that Marvel promised to do and fucked everyone over on. We're getting a Scott Derrickson Doctor Strange. We're getting a Sam Raimi Doctor Strange. And then it just takes out everything under its legs. With these, you got a Brad Bird Mission Impossible, you got a J.J. Abrams Mission Impossible film, but we got a John Woo, a Brian as a split diopter in a fucking Mission Impossible movie. I think it honours its filmmakers, and it's got a really good legacy. And I think in a modern world, legacy is a touchy subject, which we'll probably talk about very soon. But I'm happy with this. I really am. As much as I've shit on this tonight, and I feel slightly like, oh, he's having a reaction rare. I am really glad that this is. I think it just managed to take it home. I'm genuinely shocked that this wasn't a dumpster fire, as the Americans like to say. I'm glad. I'm really proud for them. I really am.
What I'm hearing is the only direction forward is for John Woo to come back and bring us number 9.
John Woo's barred from the building, Carson. John Woo didn't get the premiere. John Woo was out. John Woo doesn't. You can't say the name on set. He got shit on with this franchise, I feel, and there's a score with Hans Zimmer and Lisa Jared in that film, and this is a weird thing. The Rugby Union was on a few years ago, and its theme tune was a sequence where he's in Australia, where he's in the plant, and he says, like, he does a Daniel Day-Lewis Last of the Mohicans monologue, like, "I will save you." And there's a score from Lisa Gerrard when she's doing her vocals, and it played in the introduction of the Rugby Union thing and of the Six Nations, and it's just so ethereal. It's amazing to listen to. And the John Woo thing there is like it was in a moment in time where it just was preoccupied of just allowing the director to craft. And with McHugh, I think it just amounts to vice that. And it's probably the last piece of filmmaking that probably allowed its directors to just blossom. McHugh was not really nothing before this, just like a screenwriter with someone we can't say his name out loud because he may appear. I don't want to even go there, but it's a fascinating thing, and I think I'd love to see more, but I'd love there's not much left on. Let's say there's not much left to want more, is there? There's not much to be like. Oh, we could have this, and I'm so happy with these. I'm so happy. Go on, sorry.
That's my takeaway. Is I feel very differently to this in like a John Wick Chapter 4. Where John Wick Chapter 4, I was like, that's an emotional moment. If you give us more, you're going to ruin this moment. I would say Final Reckoning does not have that emotional weight at the end where I'm like, if you get more, you are ruining the perfect ending for these characters or for this world. But there's just nothing more you can do. like outside of like, I understand they never went to space like the Fast and Furious movie, but as far as stakes, as far as weight, as far as, I mean, especially weight, there's just nothing you can do. There's nothing more action wise you can do. There's no more actual grounded stakes plot wise. You can't go back and create that legacy like Nick was mentioning, where you're pulling from those other films because you've already done that. There's no direction forward to this that doesn't feel like a step down to me. But I would say it's a very different beast than even like the newest Matrix films, and we'll get there in a minute with our question of the week. But like, there's just nothing left here. But I also, at the same time, if they were making more, at least I will say, and I will say, like, you know what, there's a driving force here of Tom Cruise wanting to make more. And if he wants more to be made, they will be made one day. I have full confidence in that. At least I would say nothing they're going to do, I feel like, is going to ruin what's already been built by this ending or by any of these 8 films. We'll always have these 8 films. So at least on that level, I'm not as concerned. I'm not as pissed off as, for example, on Nick, I'm sure this is more your conversation, so I don't want to act like I'm the John Wick guy here. But it's not as tragic as the John Wick extended continuing universe happening with what they produced with John Wick Chapter 4, which we talked about also on the podcast. Go listen to that episode. But I think with that, let's go around. Any final thoughts we have on Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning? Nick, do you have any last things you want to mention?
I think that despite all the negatives that we talked about, I think the core of Mission Impossible has always been that watching them is just exhilarating. And I will say I have the most problems with this one. It's not one of my favorites, and it's still like a 4-star, full stop 4 stars action extravaganza. I still had such a blast watching it. I still got emotional in a couple of key moments. I was just very happy. I'm just very happy. This is also my first time actually getting good gadgets out of my film screenings. I got 2 different posters out of this, some cards, a popcorn bucket with like all of the movies around it, which is very nice. So I'm not popularly, I'm not someone who's like super into mainstream cinema, but both John Wick and Mission Impossible have just been very special comfort action franchises for me, always there in my darkest times. And it feels in a way almost symbolic for me that at the moment where I am fully going into my career as a filmmaker is the moment when both franchises seemingly have finished and also have potentially can continue forever. I think it's good for things to finish, and I think if this is the ending, it's not the ending I probably hoped for, but I do think it's still a fitting ending. And I think it will only get better over time. I already remember people being very negative. When I say people, I mean like fans who spend too much time online who were very negative with that reckoning, and they're already coming around on it. They hated the soundtrack, now they love it. Lauren Balfe, amazing. They hated the characters, now they love them. Oh my god, look at the set pieces. I think the same is going to happen with Final Reckoning. Let the dust settle. Let's look back on this when it hits digital, like the IMAX version, whatever, in September, and we'll probably be like, you know what, it has problems, but also it still really works as its own film. So thumbs up.
Okay, but did your theater give you an A24 tooth? I didn't think so.
Is this a tooth?
But I'll
An
say
actual
this.
Tooth?
It's a floss.
Okay. I thought it
it's
was
in
like
the
a
shape of
guitar.
tooth.
What
Okay.
from?
Shout out. Bring her back. Shout
Oh
out.
my god!
I don't know why. Even after watching the movie, I don't know why. To be honest, odd. I'll say for my final thoughts, like, yes, if I think this is a film that all comes down to what expectations you bring to it. Like, yes, I think we've identified some really clear negatives here, and I think really, when you think about this in terms of being a conclusion to this franchise, you do get areas where it could be improved on, it could be better. But ultimately, I cannot lie when I say I sat there at my screening and was reminded why, like, I love cinema, and especially with a blockbuster genre, which has been, I cannot, and we did our summer blockbuster series. I know there's been like a few good ones here and there. It has been just the bottom of a dumpster that is molded on fire. Like, it's been hell to sit through so many of these films, to the point where like summer blockbusters are the reasons I don't go see a lot of movies anymore, because I cannot bear to imagine sitting through Indiana Jones, Ghostbusters Afterlife. All these fucking films are terrible. I mean, they're just painful. And I'm sat there, and yes, again, there are these issues, but it's also this incredible action. It's this incredible moment of cinema where it all just somehow works. And it feels like this film is so close to jumping the shark, but the craft is still there, reminding us that, like, no, you can make a good action movie. You can have these sets and have these action set pieces that matter. You can have this heart. You can have like good visual effects in a time where every other movie on this scale looks fucking abysmal. This movie looks great visual. Like, there's so much here to where, like, I sat there in the cinema and I had like, not even just like, oh my God, that film was so fun, but I was like, this is a blockbuster that does not get made anymore. Arguably on this level, because of technology, it's never been made. Like Peace and Love, I mean, the Mission Impossible films have always been good, but a lot of those visual effects have aged quite poorly from some of the earlier ones. Like, this is a blockbuster that, like, is, in my opinion, if you're going for the dumb summer blockbuster, and I'm not saying it's a completely dumb movie, there are some definitely intelligent things here. This is it on a level that, like, I cannot say I've seen almost ever, and as far as going to the cinema, enjoying films at the cinema, which I think we all like movies. Tom Cruise, again, made me sit in the theater and go, I love movies, and this is why. So I had a really, it's like this dumb summer blockbuster, in my opinion. That's how I view it, as the positives. But like, I had this really kind of almost emotional reaction to how much I enjoyed this and how much I feel like we've been lacking. Even like, I would say John Wick is a very different beast when you look at the makeup of those films. Recent Bond films have been a very different beast than what this is. I cannot think of many other examples that are on this level. And I really appreciate the film, and I really recommend the movie. I mean, go out in the cinema, go to the IMAX theater, pay the little bit of extra money, or just go on a normal screen if you don't have that money. Totally fine also. And just let it wash over you. Just get lost in these 30-minute action sequences, and it's incredible. I cannot express my gratitude towards this movie and my love for that experience enough, which I think sometimes when you talk about cinema gets lost. I know we all want to go to Cannes and do our little film Twitter reactions and break down all this stuff, and I think it's worthy to have conversations like we had today, breaking down some of these flaws at the same time. You don't have to be ignorant towards them, but sometimes just a good movie is a good fucking movie, and I feel like this movie is a good movie, so I appreciate that. Jack, what are your final thoughts?
You two perfectly summed up my thoughts about this. I think from both angles. I think it's very rare, just to echo your point, Carson, to come on here and talk about a modern blockbuster and not come away either disappointed, disenfranchised, or bitter. And even with talking about the negatives here, and even talking about how high we put this on a pedestal, I am flabbergasted of how good this is. Like, it's so thrilling. And like you said, I would want to watch this immediately afterwards. If I can go again, I will do. I watched this in standard economy class because obviously someone had to go watch it in Screen X and IMAX. Sorry, I'm just joking, but I'm not able to watch that where I can, but it takes like 55 minutes to get there. And the one thing when I watched it, I was like, because you watched it before me, Nick, and you mentioned it in the chat, and I was like, you bastard. I was like, oh my God. The sequence in the submarine, I was like, oh my God, I wish I'd watched this in IMAX. And I think that once you get that and it hits you, once you get that bite and that feeling, you got me. When I know that this is a sequence that is so enthralling, I want to watch it in the biggest and loudest place. You have cornered me to a point where I'm just enamored with the craft. When I watched Fallout a few years ago, I remember going on Apple TV and buying them on 4K. And that for me is like the biggest sympathy I can give to these films is that once I watch one of them, I want to go back and rewatch them. I had such a satisfaction of watching this franchise. I have adored this from afar. I really, really like the evolution of what it's taken some chances, it's taken some hits, but they've always been keen to present a legacy of just not being feared, to not fear anything, to have compassion, to love thy neighbour, as one would say, and to have affection, to just against all odds prevail. And the unknown is always going to be the unknown. but the idea of these characters presented to just fight against the good fight, I always found to be quite inspiring on an emotional level. But even on the craft, this just does not disappoint. All of them are just so thrilling, and it just loved you like falling in love with it on screen and just being enamored by it. It's just such a thrilling experience. And yes, it has some misgivings, it has some misdeeds, but walking away from this and wanting to watch it again and just thinking, just sat there. Because I remember taking myself out just for a second in this festival sequence and like looking around, and it was like just all these faces is lit up with this white light in the dark. It's like enamored like faces. It just there's something so enthralling about watching it, and I think in an era where, like you said, Carson, it's quite hit and miss for tentpole releases. I'm not interested in watching Thunderbolts. That time is gone for me. Anything to do with Star Wars, I'm not interested. It's very rare I'll go watch something like this, which ultimately is sort of a disadvantage because this is what trying to keep cinema alive at this point, or the cinematic experience, should I say. But watching like this and watching the passion, and I just think it is absolutely enthralling to watch. So if this gets reinvented, one thing I have to say is what made this so interesting is that yes, the star stayed the same and the ideas stayed the same, but it took chances in its direction. Now, this is going to come across quite strange. If this was to come back with Cruise, it has to take a different direction. McHugh has to take a step back. And I think to see another filmmaker take a stab at this, that's the direction it needs to go. And I think McHugh's probably hit his mark now and be like, I'm done. There's 3 films there. 4 films, should I say, sorry. And I think that's probably its mark of where you can take those characters. You've had your era. I think getting another director like Brad Bird, a visionary, a really good filmmaker, JJ who can think out of the box, mystery box that is, or at least a John Woo or a Brian De Palma who looks at cinema in a different aesthetical way, I think is the factor where you could bring this back in 7 or 8 years with someone who is a fledgling director, who in 8-10 years time is someone who is a visionary, who is able to wants to do crazy things with a Tom Cruise who sees a protege. That's the only way I can see this coming back. But as is, to be 8 films deep into this and not have a dud, it is a testament to its craft and the lifeblood of cinema. Very, very, very rare, extremely rare, and to be highly successful as well. I'm just hoping that the next chance it gets, it runs a risk. It's got nothing to lose. It's got nothing to lose. Nobody knew who Chad Stahelski was, bar being Keanu Reeves' a stunt double in a few Matrix movies and stuff like that. Like, and you give someone a chance of creativity and something blossoms. Give someone a chance the next time behind the camera. Let them roll the dice and have a visionary, and I think you can have a second wind of this. But as of now, I'm just so pleasantly surprised. Even though I've probably gone above and beyond and having misgivings with it, this is still an incredible experience to witness, and it's a very enthralling one and somewhat poignant. And I think when it hits its moments of profoundness, I think it hits it with a swelling nature of again a poignant sense. So fair play to it. I'm very much willing to watch it again. I can't wait.
I think with that, that's going to do it for our review of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. I think we all agree. Please go check this out in the theater if you have not already. Let's go to our question of the week, presented by Nicolò Grasso. This was his creation. I love it. What is your favorite final film within a franchise? And I initially was like, this is a kind of hard one to answer, because what really is, like, there are a lot of films that are the final one, but they were never meant to be. There's a lot that say they're the final, but as you mentioned earlier, Jack, like, are there ever really the final film? Like, who knows? So it's an interesting question, Nick. I'll turn it over to you first. What is your favorite films that are the final ones in a franchise?
Like I found it interesting because I was wondering, like, would we consider a trilogy a franchise? I would say no, because otherwise I probably would have gone with something like Before Midnight or something like that, because it's like, it is a trilogy. Trilogies just have a different structure. I would genuinely have picked John Wick Chapter 4 as my favorite franchise ender, because I think it's just so consistently brilliant. But then it's not the franchise ender, but it still would qualify, I think, because it was meant to be that. I know the good Jack will probably pick something else starring Keanu Reeves, but I will say it's not confirmed as a franchise ender, and it's probably going to take you all by surprise. Jackass Forever. Jackass Forever, I think, was such a joyful film. The year it came out literally at the perfect time. It reinvigorated people with a sense of joy and fun without much of the nastiness that I didn't like from some of the Jackass films. It focused on what I really did like. It had some lovely tributes to people that came and went. um, it was just a celebration of life and living, of growing old, of mistakes and embracing those mistakes. I don't think they will be physically able to make any more jackasses. If they do, God bless them. But it played out like a franchise finale of sorts. And when I was looking at all the franchises that I've seen and that I've finished, I was like, you know what? Jackass Forever actually was just a perfect combination of these people's entire careers doing stunt work, basically, which kind of ties into Mission Impossible. So yeah, that was my pick.
That is like a great answer. What an inspired answer.
Surprising.
Jack, what are your answer?
I'm not actually going to go for what you think I'm going to do. I'm not going to do for the Wachowski thing. I found this to be actually really difficult. I think, like you said, Carson, nothing's ever really finished. I think when you look at a franchise, and more power to Mission Impossible, the Final Reckoning, I think it's really hard to find something that can end and be substantial, engaging, enthralling, and also land. I think it's really difficult. I think once you get past three, I think it's such a struggle. And there was a few that I wanted to make. There's two I found, and I don't know if there's one obvious one because it's behind me. But I do. I've got two. One's obvious, but the other one I don't think you'll guess. The first one probably would be Glass. It's not a feature that I think, hand on heart, I probably would have wanted if you'd have asked me at the time, like, what? How would you reckon David Dunn's character will go? Like, but and how the narrative arc forms. But for them both, for Split to come out and surprise me, and then to get a finality with it, I was not really interested in that. I just wanted to see it presented. And I think we've spoke about this for hours on the podcast as well. Go listen to that. But I find it such an interesting abstract, or sorry, a thesis to look at something and go against the grain of the superhero fatigue and also convention. Deconstruct that while also highlighting tragedy and the idea of that what you think is going to happen to these characters because you're programmed to is not the case. It's going to happen. And I think there's tragedy points there, profoundness to it about being special, about being unique. And if you look at something that when someone looks at someone who's not, when you look at mental illness, for example, and you look at mental issues, and there's a fabric in society where we exercise those people, and we put them into rooms, and we put them in the shadows, and we don't talk about them. We don't highlight anything. I think there's sort of a freedom with Glass, which I think is quite inspiring. But the one I'm going to go for here, and this took ages to find, and this is going to shock you both, is Trainspotting 2. Now, I have no emotional connection to the first one by it being a cult classic, a British classic, and an absolute stellar feature. But when that got announced as a legacy sequel, it feels like the first of many. Was it 2017? I think it is 2016, 2017. I remember they were talking about it for years. It's going to be called T2. I remember Danny Boyle doing the press for it. Like, we've got to ask James Cameron if we can have T2. I was like, well, is he God? Like, he's in New Zealand doing some stupid shit with blue people, whatever it is. And I just thought to myself, like, yeah, whatever. Like, I'm not interested. I remember watching it at university my final year, and I was like, I need to see this again. As soon as it ended, I wanted to watch it again. And I've done it a few times. I watch it back to back. There's something quite affirming about that film where you look at them side by side and you look at how it introspectively looks at itself within it, narratively within itself, contextually, and looking at when you get older. I mean, bear in mind, it was a year I was born. It came out, so I have no emotional connection to the film. But I find how that lands to look at middle age and to look at growing and look at mistakes and moving on from a place and coming back and trying to dictate if that's a negative or a positive and finding oneself. And I think the artistry in that film is gorgeous. When he goes to visit his dad and the shadow of his mother's there, the woman who gave birth to him, who was let down throughout his life. I just think it's like, and there's a texture there and a profound poignancy in its artistic merit and looking at and the score to it. Anyone who puts Frankie Goes to Hollywood Relax into a film is like, well, you've got my attention. And then to put Run DMC in there as well, I'm like, well now you have my attention. And I think how it's shot's wonderful, bringing everyone back. I just think it's just one of very few films that not only nails the fabric and the texture of what it's trying to dictate, but also it's like none of them ever left. Even though Ewan McGregor and Danny Boyle had a major fallout with The Beach, it just feels like everybody is wanting to honour those characters. I think Robert Carlyle is magnificent, and I tell you, I think Ewan Bremner as Spud. There is a horrifying reality of tragedy there of someone getting lost, never really being found, while all of them have a trajectory. He just hasn't got that, and I think he's been writing the book. I don't know. There's such a beauty to that film, and it's not something I adore either. I just think it's absolute stellar work, and it's just a film that no one really talks about in the sense of hitting everything it wanted to present. And I think the profoundness of that film is probably speaks to a generation above, probably maybe a generation above me. And the score as well, getting Underworld back. I don't know. I just think it's just everything now I would hate is done there in such perfection that you just one of a kind. But I'm interested to know yours, Carson.
I have two answers. I guess I was only planning to have one, but I'll mention The Matrix Resurrections.
Yeah.
It's almost blasphemous, I feel like, for on this podcast for me out of all people here to talk about them when someone else is on this call. I think I'm more high on that film than you are. I mean, transport us back to like the mindset of 2021, feeling so terrified for that film coming out and seeing it deliver, in my opinion, such a meaningful and heartfelt experience. Maybe it doesn't capture the same magic as that original trilogy, right? Like that's very hard to do, obviously, but still incredibly, I think a fantastic film. Check out our full review on that. Then also, oh, of course. I have to mention, and hopefully this is, in some ways, I hope this is not the last one. In some ways, I desperately plead they don't make any more of these if we're going to switch who's making them. Saw X. I mean, it is franchise that is so meaningful for me. Seeing John Kramer on that big screen once again with the music, with the Twisted Pictures logo. I think it's a fantastic Saw film. Always going to be sad that if we don't get another one of these, not just because I like the franchise, but because they set up a sequel here, we don't need to get in. Like, I'll just get very depressed if we talk about the direction behind the scenes that is going.
Go on Twitter on June 10th.
Oh God, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I guess I'll see you there June 10th.
Something's going to be announced.
Okay, that's scary.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in a Saw trap now, honestly, until June 10th. I'll just say I love Saw X. I think it delivered everything I want. A very interesting Saw film, but one like I'm so happy, especially after Peace and Love. Love the franchise, but the shit that was Saw 3D, that was Jigsaw, that was Spiral, and we were there for Spiral. I'll say we were definitely there. But to get one more of these that really delivers that classic Saw feeling, to restore that feeling, was very meaningful, and I will always cherish that big.
I'm shocked experience. You haven't chosen Paranormal Activity next of kin, but maybe that we just differ on.
We don't.
I'm shocked you've chosen it at Saw X. I did not see that coming.
Really? Huh? I feel like it was a very me answer. I mean, I could also say Mamma Mia. I would say Mamma Mia 3. Here we go again, number 3. Just I know that film's not out yet, but retract. I mean, like ahead of time, I can tell you that film's going to be great. With that, let's go to rapid reviews. Anything we've seen recently that we haven't talked about on the podcast? Jack, take it away. What have you seen recently?
I'm going to shock people here. I've watched 2 films, and they were both meant to be on Uncut Gems, and I missed one and made the other. The first one was Ishtar. This is not a tragedy of a film that I think people project it to be. It's very misguided. It's like weirdly tonally inept. It doesn't have any narrative, and the screenplay is like all over the place. It's like a wave. It's like up and down, up and down. But I just thought it was interesting. I thought it was fun, but never funny. And I think Elaine May got majorly shit on by the 2 people in that film who got a career, which was Beatty and Hoffman. I think for Elaine May to get in jailhouse direction or direct to jail, should I say, for a film that she was sort of like told to vacate the editorial, and she wasn't allowed to direct because of Warren Beatty's sort of like issue on set and stuff. I was sort of more of a tragedy in its own right, but I thought Ishtar was absolutely fine. But the other one that I did on Uncut Gems, you can listen to this. It's coming out in the next few weeks. And I keep on forgetting the name. It's Robert Altman's Macabre and it's McCabe and Miss Miller. And you can hear more of my thought. You can tell like I've like had no sleep on that podcast. So anyone who's like he's repeating himself like yeah, because I'd been up for like 16 hours. My first Robert Altman bar Popeye. I've got no perception of Robert Altman about knowing sort of his trajectory in Hollywood and understanding his commitment to film. I don't really have an idea of his cinematic prowess. But that film is an incredibly sort of misguided, slow, meandering, passive venture, a folk anti-Western in an era where you've got Steve McQueen, Paul Newman, Warren Beatty, you've got Dennis Hopper, you've got this anti-Hollywood regime of going against the leading man and resisting the idea of a monologue, resisting the image, and making these sort of anti-ventures of Le Mans and Judge Roy Bean with Paul Newman, John Huston, this. Interesting ventures. Some of them are more positive than the others, but it was an interesting conversation. But it was one where this film just didn't do a lot for me. And I think to say that Julie Christie and Warren Beatty were dating at the time, they have absolutely no chemistry. It's just a very strange, flat venture. It has like a milky aesthetic as well, where it's got like smoky aesthetic. And the last 25 minutes, Rob Altman goes, "Yeah, I'm done," and then just like takes it away for a shootout at the end, which is actually really well done. But it's like, and there's arguments because of the white balance, because it's actually shot in winter. Really, it's because he wanted people to actually not like actually concentrate on the image. Listen to it. It's on the Uncut Gems podcast. Randy and Jakob do some good shit over there. No emphasis on shit. I mean, just like they do some good stuff over there. But I hope they find that funny. There's nothing to lead that to anyone else. But yeah, those are the two I've seen. I've got Fear Street Prom Queen. I know Carson loves it. I've got that coming up. I've got Drop that I'm going to review soon. And I had something. Oh yeah, not Resident Evil. God, I'm losing the plot. I've got Final Destination, which looks to be like doing really well. I'm glad for the horror. And then Fountain of Youth, which is going to be I've heard the beat of the summer. It's going to be the film of the summer. But yeah, so that's all I've seen. So I'm interested in what you two have seen.
Good luck with the Drop, buddy. I'll go through my list, I guess. What a weird world we live in. I can go to the cinema and watch the big blockbuster and be like, oh, I love cinema. I feel like cinema's saved. And then I watch the A24 film, The Legend of Ochi, and I'm like, oh my God, cinema's dead. What has happened to A24? This film is fucking atrocious. It has literally the only thing I can compare it to with its directing ability is, remember the very early days of AI videos where they'd be like, what if Star Wars was directed by Wes Anderson? And it would just be all these dolly zooms on these characters that just have like this weird texture and they kind of look Wes. That's what this movie is for literally an hour and a half. It is atrocious. The one good thing is you have Willem Dafoe here running around just being Willem Dafoe yelling in the forest. The issue is like, it's just the most basic version of Willem Dafoe. Like he just showed up. They didn't even give him a script and they were like, well, why don't you go yell and just seem kind of cool, like Willem Dafoe? And that's all he does for an hour and 30 minutes. Like, this film is literally terrible. Some decent puppetry also, I guess I should say. I know this, to be clear, this did not use AI. Everyone is saying like the directors were like, no, there's no AI at all. I've never seen something that feels so much like an AI video and not been AI. It's shocking. I watched Ron Howard's Apollo 13 and just got really like pissed off at it, to be honest. There's a lot of good stuff here. Ron Howard, dude, a director I want to love. I don't know what it is about Ron Howard. Every film I'm like, okay, this guy I want to say is a great director. And I feel like I just talked about him on this podcast with something. And then every single one of his films you watch and it's like, oh, this could have been great, but clearly Ron Howard just doesn't know or doesn't want to make a great movie. There is so much emotional depth here and what it means to be literally fingertips away from achieving your dream and then having that torn away from you. And Ron just does not care. Ron just wants to go with the spectacle of science here here and just like presents this, but then doesn't go into it. Damien Chazelle, if you ever want to make a follow-up to First Man, please tackle the Apollo 13 story, because there's so much here on the text that Howard just does not care about. It was a tough decision, I'll be honest, to do this episode, because this is the same week Lilo and Stitch dropped, everybody. And I know Jack and Nick, you both messaged me like, please can we do Lilo and Stitch instead? And I was like, no guys, we have to do Mission Impossible. It's not good. It's like, it's fine. It is just, I feel like this is the one, weirdly, with these live action remakes, where I was just sitting there like, what is the fucking point of any of this? You have, and also in this economy, I think it genuinely pissed me off, the idea that like a family with like 4 kids is going to cost them like $150 to go to the theater, and they're just presenting garbage. Like, it's the same story, just every change is worse. Galifianakis is giving like a career worst performance here, and it's just like, no, it's justified, because Stitch is gonna look cute. He's gonna be like riding around acting like a dog, and it's gonna be cute. And it's like, the fact that Disney, of all studios, with the size and money and creative power they've proven to have at points, this is just like what they're doing, and we're just accepting this. And then people are online being like, no, it's really funny, guys, because Stitch is cute. It's fucking embarrassing. Peace and love. Watched the Goonies, didn't like it. Didn't grow up with the Goonies. I don't want to just hang out with these kids yelling. Also, the adventure in this is like terrible. I'm so sorry. It's just like linear going through a cave. Like, there's no like stakes. There's no really even like creativity they have to use to get through outside of the piano sequence. It's literally just like the most annoying children. Also, the romance here no one talks about is fucking crazy. The kissing is so uncomfortable in this. Not a fan of the Goonies. I'm so sorry. I will end on a positive note. For the first time ever, I watched Martin Scorsese's Casino. Oh my God. What a film. Maybe one of my favorite Scorsese's, maybe my favorite Scorsese. I think a lot of people are drastically unfair to this. Number one, you want to talk about 3 hours that moves. This movie is constantly moving. I don't think Las Vegas has ever been shown in this light on screen. I think Las Vegas is a fascinating city when you just look at like the evolution of American culture. I think on screen it's been tackled in so many engaging ways. Every neon light, every hole dug in the desert, every single bullet, every single tear and loss, dream is put on screen here brilliantly. But even more so than that, I just think this is a wildly, wildly complex feature with some really, really engaging characters and relationships that doesn't, again, no one like, no, I don't want to say no one talks about this film, but I feel like in the conversation of Scorsese's career, this does not get the attention or the recognition it deserves. And I think there's a lot here to be broken down, looking at obsession, looking at ego. The character of his wife is like literally one of the most interesting written female characters of Scorsese's career. And again, just nobody talks about it. Sharon Stone is incredible here. De Niro is like incredible here, playing against type in some ways, playing a very interesting projection of power that is also just powerless to everyone around him, or everything around him rather. I love Casino. I really like, this is one where I was like, I heard it's really good. I have these high hopes for it. And I ended up being like blown away even with my high expectations. So I'm very happy I finally checked out Casino. Nick, what have you seen this week?
Very little. I've actually been watching so few movies, so I'll be very quick. I've actually seen only 3 movies that are not worthy. Um, Final Destination Bloodlines. Watched it in the cinema. Great fun. Great fun. Also, a tremendous send off to Tony Todd that had me very emotional. Honestly, what happens with Luther in this film kind of reminded me of Tony Todd. So I'm like, is Ving Rhames doing okay? Should we check on him? Because it doesn't look too good. Even like if you see videos of him nowadays, it don't look too hot. I also did watch Warfare, which I found to be very interesting. I think there could be a whole podcast just talking about the film's politics or lack thereof, or by trying to not have politics, what the politics actually are. I do think it's an anti-war film. I do think there's a lot of conflicting ideologies at its center due to the nature of the film that make it way more interesting than if it were something more overtly like liberal, just like war is bad, let's just show this and that and blah blah blah. It's very thorny, but I think also an excellent film that I don't really want to watch ever again. It was like one of those perfect cinema viewings experiences, gave me a panic attack, and I don't want to watch it ever again, please. And lastly, one of my favorite films of the year, big surprise, Black Bag, Steven Soderbergh, my man, so fun, just scene after scene of excellent writing, excellent direction, excellent editing, just absolutely on point in every single step. Very funnily, you could watch Black Bag without credits beginning to end, and Final Reckoning would still be going on. Just incredible, incredible film. I really, really liked it. That's it. Simple week.
Hey, not bad. At least you're not watching bad cinema.
At least I'm not
That's always
watching
the
Lilo
goal.
Stitch.
Okay, well, that felt directed.
Oh,
At least we're not
My
watching Heart of Stone, right, Jack?
That
I will
that
say
was
my
like 3
cinema
years ago
was.
now. Okay,
It was
and
nice to
also
go
I
to the
never watched
movies and
Electric
everyone
State
was
either.
there.
Hey, I will say this movie we talked about today, Mission Impossible, costs less than the Electric State, so
That's
that's a
disgusting.
win.
I don't believe in like
Um,
capital punishment, but fucking hell, like we've got to make choices there in society where that's not right. That's sick, actually. I was like, I don't know why you brought up right at the end. I'm gonna go to bed in like 25. I'm gonna go to bed, rest my head, and that's the thought I've got. Where are we going? What we spent so long not talking about those two fucking idiots behind that camera, and you had to bring them up 2.5 hours into it about fucking Russo brothers.
Save it. We'll be there next December. We'll talk about it.
No, we won't. No, we won't be doing. I'm not doing it. I can't do that anymore. Can't do it.
Our Russo brothers marathon beforehand. I think we could do it. Go through the filmography. There's ways.
I think I'd rather die than
Yes.
watch Cherry.
My favorite thing ever is when
I just wouldn't want to be here.
My favorite thing ever is when a former producer of this show got an early screening to it and watched the screening. I was like, guys, best picture incoming. This was magnificent. Whew, y'all. When I say I was shocked watching it.
Memories.
Also thought Malcolm Murray was going to win Best Picture. So a good year for him. With that said, Nick, where can we find you on social media?
You can find me on Blue Sky and Instagram at Nikigura97, Letterboxd Nicolò Grasso, and yeah, just keep up with my reviews, YouTube videos, and my podcast, other podcast, Anatomy of an Adaptation, which is on Spotify and YouTube. Check it out if you like books and film adaptations. I know the good buddy boy Jack here will be finally joining it after 4 years for a very, very special episode. 4 years of the show's existence.
Wow.
Not 4 years
I've
waiting
never
for
been
it.
asked.
I'm very excited. I'm very pumped.
I would never want to. I would never want to. You need to make me an episode here. I've just never been asked. I'd love to be on some of them. How dare you bring that up again? Like I got shit on
No,
my
I'm
heart.
very happy. I said it in like I'm very happy.
It didn't come across that way. I'm really excited for that. I wanted to read. Wait, I don't think you've announced it. I have said it online a few times. I'm sorry.
It's for another time. Follow me on social media to find out more. Jack, where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, don't listen to any Uncut Gems podcast, please. You can find me on X and Twitter. I can't be asked on that. I mostly just send memes to Carson and Jacob responds now, so it's a weird place to be. But you can find me on Clapper and Letterboxd to the username at Jak-Luke Sharp. Clapper, I've got some Black Bag reviews just dropped, which is like it's taken ages to edit. I loved it. My review is really interesting. I could say so myself. Working Man, loads of reviews on there. Marching Powder. You know, I'm trying to beat the allegations here of not watching shit, but Heart Eyes just dropped, which I really enjoyed as well. There's a lot of stuff on there. I think I've got just a few more Novocaines on there, which just a few sleeper hits I managed to pick up on the cinema. On Letterboxd, I think Pride Month with Carson and I've got a podcast of that coming out on ClapperCast. Strangely, someone's not on there. I can imagine why. But yeah, we're doing that, and then I'm going to go to Pride Month as well. But we spoke about it on the podcast. So there's some really good stuff next month in June to come out. So, but yeah, thank you very much for having me on. It was nice to speak about a film, modern blockbuster, where we didn't really sort of feel defeated about it. It felt really good to end on something in May. There's a positive. I don't think we can do Lilo and Switch. I can't do those anymore after stuff like this. It's nice to watch something so positive in a way that was so difficult to watch and how depressing it was as well. But thank you very much for having me on, Nick. It's lovely to see you again, and I can't wait for what we're about to do in the next month or so. You've got me back into reading. I've learned the art of being able to read now.
Heck
So I've been
yeah.
reading all sorts of shit. The Kid Stays in the Picture. I'm gonna read Twilight with my wife. I'm there. Yeah. Well, I'm there. Yeah, Kid Stays in the Picture is really good anyway. By there, I recommend that as a if we're allowed to do books as well. Really good interest about Robert Evans, crazy character. But thank you very much for having me on, Carson and Nick. It's lovely to see you again. I'll see you in
I will
another
say
4
Twilight is
weeks,
a
Nick.
rough. I will say Twilight's a rough read, so good luck with that one, buddy.
Yeah, well, we all got to
Love the
finish
movie.
it.
Good book. I think we did that. Did we do that for your podcast, Nick? Yeah, we did
We
it.
did with Hillary.
Would recommend. You can find me on Letterboxd and Blue Sky, just Carson Timar. As Jack mentioned, some fun stuff coming up on the podcast. We have our review for Edward II dropping next week to kick off our Pride Month celebration. Plenty of fun stuff there. Also some new releases and old releases scattered throughout the month. So I think it's a really fun June we're coming up on. And with that, we will see you next time. Goodbye.
I bought this for a total of £3 off eBay. Are you serious? Because this is really good. This, prepare yourselves, because I don't want it to break.
Oh,
that's great.
For £3, that's a steal.
Yeah. Oh fucking hell!